Today we're going to look at and cover one of the most legendary hip-hop labels of all time. I mean, just how huge is Def Jam Records in the history of the hip-hop music industry? Can you think of another record label who even has past presidents that are famous? Probably not. Lyor Cohen was the first, Def Jam from 1988 to 1998, and Lyor was followed by Kevin Liles in 1998 into 2004, which was the year that none other than Jay-Z took over, until 2007. Then music industry icon L.A. Reid moved into the Def Jam office from 2007 to 2012, and even Eminem's manager, who helped Eminem form Shady Records, stepped into Def Jam president position between 2018 and 2020. Next question: how many hip-hop labels can really claim to create a high-selling fighting video game when you get to pick from DMX, Ghostface Killah, Method Man, Redman, Nori, Capone, Joe Budden, Scarface, Ludacris, WC, and DJ Funkmaster Flex? All of these artists were all signed to Def Jam around the time that the legendary video game, if you were a kid at the time, Def Jam Vendetta, was released in 2003. If it wasn't for Def Jam in the 80s and the 90s, we would have never had the hip-hop icons that have inspired millions, from people like LL Cool J, Slick Rick, Redman, and Foxy Brown, to major groups like Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, and Onyx. But unfortunately, as history has unfolded from its origin in 1984, it's also unraveled in more recent years with a plethora of performers that want to head in the opposite direction and get themselves as far away from this historic record label. The artist complaints have stacked up over and over again. The proof is in the pudding just if you look at the results, and with some of their past rosters using exit strategies as proclaiming that they're dropping their final album in favor of fatherhood, to retiring from rapping altogether and becoming the one that interviews rappers instead of making the albums that get publicized. So let's take a look at the historic birth of this milestone in rap music, the presumed death of Def Jam Records, which is what it seems like right now, and why I believe this to be the case. Before we get into all the drama, let's just take a moment to celebrate the come up of this monumental hip-hop brand, more than just a label, called Def Jam. After listening to It's Yours by T. La Rock, Russell Simmons, who was already really recognized in the New York hip-hop scene, joined forces with Rick Rubin at Def Jam. The two collected demo tapes from up-and-coming rappers to build up the collection of artists that they would launch into the music marketplace. Rick Rubin explained how he first met Russell Simmons, who was already the go-to guy to book New York City rappers in the 80s for shows. Russell and I met at a party for a TV show called Graffiti Rock. It was a pilot episode, and Run DMC appeared on it, and the Treacherous Three appeared on it, and it was in a loft somewhere on the west side in the teens. But I remember being really excited when I met him because, as a fan of hip-hop, he had already, his name on a lot of the rap records that already came out. Curtis Blow, Run DMC, so I was excited to meet him. And when I met Russell, it turns out that It's Yours was his favorite record, which was a surprise to me. And he was really surprised when he met me because he didn't picture me as I was, based on what the record sounded like. Russell was 5 years older than me, and he was already established in the music business, and I had no experience whatsoever. So even then, he was the face of hip-hop. Even before Def Jam, he was the face of hip-hop. It's true. In 1984, the same year that Def Jam got off the ground with both Russell Simmons and Rick Rubin behind it, the label earned their first hit song thanks to LL Cool J's I Need a Beat, a single that quickly sold an astonishing 100,000 copies on the brand new independent rap label. What originally drove the creation of Def Jam in the first place was the desire of Russell and Rick to prove that hip-hop music in the 80s wasn't just some sort of temporary fad, and that they could fill this niche that the mainstream record labels were missing out on and totally ignoring. But those major labels definitely began to take notice when LL Cool J, who was only 17 years old, released his debut album in 1985, and it sold gold in its first 5 months of release. That's 500,000 copies. Speaking of youth, when Def Jam was founded in 1984, Rick Rubin was a 21-year-old NYU art school student from Long Island, whose music was getting made in his dorm room. Queens native Russell Simmons was only 27 years old and has expressed how entering into business with Rick Rubin's Def Jam made more sense than to start his own record label imprint. He had a drum machine full of hot joints. I mean, his whole DMX machine was full of hit records, from what I could hear. He was a smart kid, and he was part of a band called the Beastie Boys, who I met later. They were phenomenal, and he was a great producer. He had produced that record It's Yours by T. La Rock, and after he produced that record, he started receiving tapes, and one of the tapes was LL Cool J's I Need a Beat. He remixed it or redid it, and it became our first release for Def Jam Records. The more I got to know Rick, the more I felt that my efforts should go into the partnership and not into a separate company. Because I already had Run DMC and Houdini and Jimmy Spice and Curtis Blow and the Fearless Four. I was managing a lot of acts, and I was ready then, and I had produced a few acts that were successful, including Run DMC. But then I saw Rick wanted to start a record company as an independent company as opposed to some distribution deal, and it made sense. I put the money in with him. Now wrap your mind around the fact that this little rap label, a rare thing in the mid-80s, went from getting started in 1984 to having a gold-selling album under their belt, and then a movie with Warner Brothers in 1985 called Crush Groove that was about the early days of Def Jam, with actor Blair Underwood in his very first movie role playing a character inspired by Russell Simmons himself. Technically, Def Jam was still in its early days, and it had already had a Hollywood movie based on its backstory. The movie soundtrack includes songs from LL Cool J, Beastie Boys, and even famous singers like Shaka Khan and Debbie Harry. From this point forward, the success at Def Jam Records exploded. In 1986, with Columbia Records on board for mass distribution of Def Jam product, the wildly entertaining white rappers known as the Beastie Boys put out their debut album, License to Ill, and didn't just make a record, they set records too. License to Ill became the first rap album to ever hit the top of the Billboard album chart, along with becoming one of Columbia Records' fastest-selling debut records to date. It clearly didn't stop selling over the course of time either, because roughly 29 years after its release, it became certified diamond by the RIAA in 2015 with over 10 million copies sold. Def Jam ended the 80s with more blockbuster albums from LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Slick Rick, and Third Base. In the 90s and 2000s, the roster was expanded to include EPMD, Nice and Smooth, Redman, Onyx, Method Man, Warren G, and became home to a whole host of smaller labels that pushed out albums from giants like Jay-Z, DMX, Ja Rule, Kanye West, Foxy Brown, and Ludacris. But with all that said, what happened with the rappers that have had issues during their time at Def Jam Records? First up to bat is Joe Budden. Yes, Budden was not always a popular podcaster and really one of the biggest voices in hip-hop media. When he was releasing music and making a name for himself with his hit song Pump It Up, some would say one-hit wonder, Joe Budden was signed to Def Jam Records in 2002. Things were looking up for the Joe Budden Def Jam connection, especially after releasing a gold-certified, self-titled debut album and pulling in a Grammy nomination. But 5 years after signing, he was pushed off the label and was a free agent all over again, with much of his career still ahead of him. What was the problem between Def Jam and Joe Budden? It actually started jumping off during the recording of what was supposed to be Budden's sophomore album, The Growth. Def Jam didn't just ask for new songs, they rejected the entire album, oddly enough after holding a listening session for the album. Joe made it known that he was super displeased with the stance that Def Jam took with his project, and he put out the first 2 installments of his Mood Music mixtape series to keep his buzz alive, and this would become a classic to Joe Budden fans this entire series. In October 2007, it was announced that Def Jam had officially let go of Joe Budden. To make matters worse, Jay-Z was in office as Def Jam's president at the time of Joe Budden's troubles, with rumors circling around that Jay allegedly was purposely blocking Budden's momentum after feeling slighted by Joe Budden in 2004. When Budden was dropped by Def Jam, Joey took aim at Jay-Z and the Def Jam building with 2 disses, Talk to Him and The Growth intro. In fact, dissing rappers was something that Joe Budden had no problem doing, as he's had feuds brewing with Drake, 50 Cent, and none other than Lil B at one point. Joe Budden also spent some time under Eminem's Shady Records umbrella as 1/4 of the Slaughterhouse Group, with top-tier lyricists Royce da 5'9", King Crooked, also formerly known as Crooked Eye, and Joel Ortiz. But Joe Budden retired from his music career in 2018 and became a full-time media personality and podcaster, hosting jobs for online programming such as Everyday Struggle, State of the Culture, as well as the Joe Budden podcast and frequently Pull Up. And speaking of Joe Budden's Pull Up podcast, this happened to be the platform where another well-known wordsmith spilled the beans about having dissatisfaction with being signed to Def Jam, none other than Jadakiss from The Lox, who famously took issue with their previous record label, P. Diddy's Bad Boy Records, who will be getting his own video. It all took place on an episode of Pull Up from April of 2019, where Jadakiss explained to show host Joe Budden how he and Fabulous, another Def Jam earner, had to make their money from the Jadakiss and Fabulous joint project called Friday on Elm Street. We made more money off the shows. The shows trump whatever money Def Jam gave us. I still get calls from some producers. They ain't get paid from that. So it's still messed up inside the system. Maybe they might have just got paid, but at least up until last month, a couple producers was calling. Kanye West is known for not holding his tongue when he's upset about anything whatsoever. The same held true when Ye spoke about record deals in general. But being that he's in business with Def Jam as a soloist and with his Good Music record label, you can't help but see that Def Jam was targeted in his rant as well. Back in September of 2020, Kanye West went all the way Kanye in his Twitter rant about the outdated exploitation tactics that record labels are still using. 90% of the record contracts on the planet are still on a royalty. A standard record deal is a trap to never have you recoup. And there's all these hidden costs like the distribution fees many labels put in their contracts to make even more money off our work without even trying. This message opened up the floodgates for other rappers to chime in, one of which was another Def Jam artist, the Maryland star Logic, who discussed an issue that he was having with getting a Lil Wayne feature taken care of by the label. Logic quotes Kanye's tweet and added, "I feel you. Def Jam ain't trying to pay Lil Tunechi his fee, so I guess the perfect remix ain't coming out. Oh, a few of my folks they money, honestly." Logic's frustrations with Def Jam didn't just stop there. On October 3rd, 2020, Logic took his issues with Def Jam to Instagram. He shared a screenshot of a text that he received from Kevin Keys Randolph, the Grammy-nominated producer that Logic has worked with. Along with the image, Logic ripped through a rant that stated the following: "At Def Jam, can you please pay my friends and musicians that have made my albums great? This is ridiculous at this point. I shouldn't be getting calls from close friends of mine in the middle of dinner with my wife about how you haven't paid them from the budget you've given me for this album. My boy Six ain't been paid all his money. Like, who produced the intro hasn't been paid all his money. Kevin Randolph, who the Rat Pack know as the voice of Kai, who I've worked with for years, hasn't been paid his money. Lil Kiki hasn't been paid his money. And my DJ Rhetoric, after I hit you up 2 months ago to pay this man, he still hasn't gotten his money. These are just the calls I've received. I don't even know who else in my friendships you're messing up. This has got to be the 6th call I received. You're ruining personal relationships here. This ain't Noah my A&R. This ain't the core homies on the label that helped me make my albums great. This is people deep in the company that I've never even met. Pay these people. What is wrong with you? I pay all my debts. This is not my debt to pay. These are friends, but they're hired musicians, and I demand you stop messing up my personal relationships. What is wrong with you? I'm not trying to start a war with my label, but at this point, it's utterly unfair. I mean, to this day, besides in advance, I have never seen a single cent in the 8 years I've been signed to this label. But I don't care about that money. I just want my homies paid. What's going on here? Y'all make me want to unretire and drop the last album I have under my contract just so I don't have to deal with y'all no more. Man, goddamn. Logic's frustrations were made crystal clear, with the only foggy part of the entire situation being why these collaborators of his were never paid in the first place. But Jadakiss, Joe Budden, Kanye West, and Logic aren't the only ones that have spoken out about conflicts with Def Jam. Valet, an artist signed to Good Music with a Def Jam connection in the back end, also appeared to watch his own career freeze up in the process on the label side. After releasing his 2019 album Running Rich through Kanye West's Good Music imprint through Def Jam, the Chicago rapper has seemed to be in limbo over there, seemingly making things happen on his own via his 2020 and 2021 features on other people's songs, such as Are You Live for Chance the Rapper. I mean, even the Dallas rapper Maj, who was signed to Def Jam and was the sixth Dallas-based artist brought on board, he still has had his own Def Jam problems. Maj even went as far as to make an entire video about the experience he endured. I will never ever want to be a part of a label. I'll never want to be in the music industry. It's just not made for me. It's just not for me, like period. I'm lucky that I came out whole and came out stronger than what I used to be. Because honestly, I could have just bowed down and just kneeled down to whatever they wanted me to do. But where I come from, I wasn't like that. I'm not built like that, period. I'm glad that some way I found the light at the end. They didn't give me that much push. Nobody really showed me off as if I was the new artist or showed me off as if I'm like the next big thing in their eyes. Not only did Maj blatantly state that he no longer had any interest in being in the music industry, he said that he was looking to connect with his audience on YouTube and collect direct donations from his fans. Then there's Lil Durk, the Chicago drill legend who had his fair share of record label drawbacks and having the greatest year of his life now. After signing to Def Jam early on in his career, Lil Durk has only put out his first 2 studio albums on Def Jam, Remember My Name in 2015 and Lil Durk 2 Times in 2016. When Lil Durk sat down with Adam 22's podcast No Jumper, Durk discussed how things went with Def Jam. It just ain't the right situation for me, Durk said. It might fit the next person, but it ain't fit me. Def Jam wanted me to go pop. And when I had something, I'm like, I'm gonna do this. They were like, nah. I had no say-so. It was just a bad situation for me. In order to make sense of Durk's gripes, he obviously didn't walk into the record label offices as a pop star in the making. His authentic edge and aggression in drill music made that clear, even with his strong, catchy melodies. In March of 2018, Lil Durk had a conversation with Billboard about his relationship with Def Jam getting dissolved. I've been with Def Jam Records for 5 years, and they gave me my first recording contract, so for that I'm forever grateful. But I'm a different artist than I was 5 years ago, and the time is right for a change. At the same time, Def Jam is making changes in their offices and trying a new direction. I didn't want to be a part of another regime change. Unfortunately for Def Jam, pushing Lil Durk too hard to go in the direction of pop music backfired, because now with his deal with Alamo and Geffen and his own creativity, Lil Durk has really came up with an undeniable hitmaker at this point. In his own creativity, Lil Durk has been on one hell of a streak. His 2021 album, The Voice, has already pushed past the point of earning a gold-selling plaque, and, well, I should say 2020 album towards the end of it, and is benefiting from huge feature on the Drake hit Laugh Now Cry Later that's gone beyond the point of 500 million streams on Spotify alone. In all fairness, even with the list of dissatisfied past signees, Def Jam is really far from an empty building. In fact, it's continued to spread its reach beyond its physical location in New York City into a whole host of other countries, with entire separate artist rosters in Africa, the Philippines, Southeast Asia, the UK, and Vietnam. Lena Waithe, the writer, producer, and actor involved in TV shows such as The Chi and Master of None, and movies like Dear White People, has even partnered with Def Jam for the formation of her own record label called Hillman-Grad Records. Lena Waithe made a statement about Hillman-Grad Records, announcing, "At Hillman-Grad Productions, we believe in identifying and amplifying new talent, and we want to continue to do that in the music industry. Jeff Harleston and his phenomenal team at Def Jam have given us their trust and their resources to help develop artists that not only have potential, but staying power. We look forward to the journey ahead." But with the reputation of Def Jam tainted by the difficult experiences that many rappers have had with the Story label, and just looking around and seeing which artists currently on Def Jam, specifically in hip-hop and rap, which were the origins of the record label, have even performed or broken out in the past 5 years, you start to see almost no one. It'll be interesting to see how they continue to rebuild and revitalize this legendary brand and image and legacy to resurrect what I believe to be the death of Def Jam Records, and potentially reemerge as the go-to record label that rappers grew up dreaming to be a part of. Back in April 17th, 2021, death of Spanish Harlem's rapper Black Rob, who was originally on Bad Boy Records, barely surpassed 50-year-old mark. It left people in a sad state of shock, especially shining a light on Bad Boy Records as a whole, how legendary of a record label it once was, and it made me think, what has happened to Bad Boy Records? Because the biggest guy we've got on there right now is Machine Gun Kelly, who doesn't even really rap no more. Just 8 days after the DMX, another rapper from his era passed away, and it left unanswered questions regarding his demise. Some hip-hop fans called it the Bad Boy curse. Other people blamed his former label owner, Diddy, among the wealthiest in business as a whole, not just rap business, for not stepping up sooner when it became public knowledge that Rob was in poor health. With Black Rob's death happening not even 2 months after the Netflix documentary was released of Bad Boy's biggest artist, the Notorious B.I.G., entitled Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, suddenly the legacy of Bad Boy Records was looking kinda spooky. From 3 rappers deceased to several artists leaving the label to dedicate their lives to religion, to even more rappers, singers, and former associates fleeing the formidable Bad Boy empire, the question remains, what has life after Bad Boy Records been like for many of the rappers whose artistry kept it overflowing with cash since its inception? After Sean P. Diddy Combs went from his position as an A&R executive at Andre Harrell's Uptown Records, developing early 90s R&B artists with a hip-hop flavor like Mary J. Blige and Jodeci, Diddy started his Bad Boy Records money machine in 1993, setting it off with rappers like Craig Mack, the Notorious B.I.G., Mace, The Lox, Black Rob, Loon, G.O.O.D, Shine, and R&B acts like Faith Evans, Total, 112, Mario Winans, and Diddy's ex-girlfriend Cassie. The talent train looked like it would travel onward forever. But strangely enough, not only are none of those performers no longer associated with Bad Boy, neither are over 20 others. In fact, there are currently only 4 core artists active on the label, and out of those 4, one of them is Diddy himself. The roster in 2021 is rounded off with singer Janelle Monáe, who came aboard in 2007, rapper gone rock star Machine Gun Kelly, who signed in 2011, and none other than They Got Amnesia, French Montana, who arrived in 2012. The net worth of the biggest star on Bad Boy, P. Diddy, is riding high near the $900 million, anywhere from $800 million to $1 billion. But that fairy tale journey was much worse for 8 guys on Bad Boy. Notorious B.I.G., Craig Mack, Black Rob are dead. 3 other Bad Boy artists left, in many cases to entirely different countries, and pursued intense religious changes in their lives. Mace left the New York City area for Atlanta to become a Christian minister. The Brooklyn representative Shine returned to his birthplace of Belize and became an Orthodox Jew. Like Mace, Loon was also from Harlem and left to live in Egypt, changed his name from Chauncey Lamont Hawkins to Amir Junaid Muhaddith, and converted to Islam. Let's first look at the life after Bad Boy Records of the very first artist to get on board, Long Island MC Craig Mack. From the Suffolk County section of Long Island, New York, rapper Craig Mack went from being an early associate of rap duo EPMD to a rapper for P. Diddy, known in the 90s as Puff Daddy, and becoming the first signee to Bad Boy Records. Mack delivered the platinum smash hit of 1994, Flavor in Your Ear, and it looked like the sky was the limit. But the Brooklyn Bad Boy Notorious B.I.G. became more of a top priority, to the point that Craig's gold album, Project Funk the World, was released a week after B.I.G.'s 6 times platinum, Ready to Die, in September of '94. Biggie even had a standout verse on Craig Mack's Flavor in Your Ear remix that also had the added star power of Busta Rhymes, LL Cool J, and Busta's cousin, Rampage. Fast forward to a year later in '95, and Craig Mack left Diddy's Bad Boy family with his follow-up album, Operation Get Down, not arriving until 1997 on a smaller labeled Street Life Records. This time around, there was no gold album status, no platinum hits of any sort, and Craig sort of faded away into obscurity, not releasing a 3rd album until 20 years later. It wouldn't be until an odd YouTube video emerged in 2012 featuring Craig Mack essentially denouncing his old rap life and reborn as a Christian worshiper at the conservative Overcomer Ministry commune based in Walterboro, South Carolina. Craig's transition is being celebrated by Overcomer Ministry pastor Ralph Gordon Stair, referred to as Brother Stair. He's also been referred to as a cult leader by some. Before Brother Stair's 2021 death, he had already pleaded guilty to the charge of assault and battery and was sentenced to time served, a total of 77 days in custody. However, numerous women have accused Brother Stair of many despicable things, to say the least. To make matters worse, Craig Mack's pastor, Brother Stair, was arrested on December 18, 2017, on 8 counts, 3 of which were first-degree criminal conduct towards women, and single counts of assault with the intent to commit criminal conduct, kidnapping, second-degree assault, first-degree burglary, and criminal conduct with a minor. What would push Craig Mack to get as far away from the music industry as possible, including turning down an offer for Bad Boy reunion performances? When Mack passed away from heart failure on March 12, 2018, at the young age of 47, it came as a shock, adding fuel to the fire that there is some sort of Bad Boy curse in the eyes of the fans. During the beginning of 1997, Bad Boy forefather Craig Mack was no longer in the picture, and Biggie Smalls, or the Notorious B.I.G. for legal purposes, was sitting at the top of the mountain, trying to end the media-hype East Coast-West Coast rap beef, especially after the September 1996 murder of his rival Tupac. B.I.G. had his sophomore album, double album, Life After Death, on the way, an eerie title for a project that the Notorious B.I.G. wouldn't even live to see it released when it hit record stores 16 days after his death. He's even pictured standing next to a funeral hearse for the album artwork. Really creepy stuff. Strangely enough, in the middle of red-hot fire tension between LA and New York, as LA was presumed to be on Tupac's side and New York presumed to be on Biggie's side when the two didn't get along, the Notorious B.I.G. still went out to Los Angeles to create the music video for his lead single, Hypnotize. In February 1997, about a month before he would be shot and killed in the state of California. He even remained out there for the Soul Train Music Awards in early March. But Biggie wasn't originally supposed to even be in LA at that time. His planned trip to Europe was canceled, and here he was in the epicenter of potential tension. During a March 8, 1997 industry party co-sponsored by Quincy Jones' Vibe magazine in the fancy Beverly Hills area outside of LA at the Peterson Automotive Museum, Biggie and his crew partied alongside superstars like Missy Elliott and Aaliyah. When the event became way too crowded, the fire department shut down the party around a half hour after midnight. The Notorious B.I.G. and P. Diddy left the festivities with Diddy hopping into the first of 3 cars and Biggie sitting in the front passenger seat of the second vehicle, which was a green GMC Suburban, next to his driver Gregory G. Money Young and 2 friends seated behind them. Diddy's lead SUV apparently rolled through a yellow light, which left Biggie's automobile remaining at the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue, when a white Toyota Land Cruiser made a U-turn to force its way behind the green GMC Suburban Biggie was in. This is when a Chevy Impala pulled up alongside Biggie, and his driver made eye contact with the rapper and unloading his pistol into the vehicle. 4 of those bullets turned the situation fatal, and the only 24 years old Biggie Smalls was pronounced dead at 1:15 a.m. on March 9, 1997. Then on May 23, 1997, 2.5 months after Big's death, the triple platinum tribute song I'll Be Missing You became the second single from Diddy's debut album No Way Out that crossed the platinum mark 7 times over in the United States alone. 8 years after Biggie's death, his mother, Valletta Wallace, published a book called Biggie, Valletta Wallace Remembers Her Son Biggie, where she writes, "The truth is, Christopher accepted the illusion of a friend and mentor for about $25,000. That's the amount Puffy lured my son with. It was enough money to make my son believe that Puffy was ready to do anything for him." The myth of the bad boy curse struck again when Diddy's sidekick rapper Mace was being put in position to be the new star soloist at the label after Biggie's passing. Mace's charming ladies' man party vibe was a younger, more lyrical version of Diddy for audiences to consume. This recipe cooked up a quadruple platinum debut album, Harlem World, released in October of '97. When it came time for Mace, birth name Mason Betha, or Beath, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, to re-up with a second album in 1999, the aptly titled Double Up, he not only quit Bad Boy the same year the album came out, but Mace became Minister Mace when he announced the formation of SANE Ministries, with SANE standing for Saving a Nation Endangered. Mace reportedly spoke on a radio show discussing the deaths of Tupac and Biggie. Tupac heard the call and he didn't heed the warning. Biggie heard it, he didn't heed it. I'm no fool. But as Mace bounced back between being a church pastor and having a few false starts when he tried to return to the rap game, it seemed that the calling of God wasn't the only reason he left Bad Boy Records. In an Instagram post in January of 2020, Mace declared that P. Diddy still owed him his publishing from 24 years ago. Your past business practices knowingly have continued to purposely starve your artist and been extremely unfair to the very same artist that helped you obtain that Icon Award on the iconic Bad Boy label. For example, you still got my publishing from 24 years ago, in which you gave me $20,000, which makes me never want to work with you as any artist wouldn't after you know someone is robbing you and tarnishing your name when you don't want to comply with his horrendous business model. Mace became a Christian pastor during his life after Bad Boy. The Brooklyn rapper Shine, with the big, booming, really biggie baritone voice, went from gangster rapper to Orthodox Jew who traveled to Jerusalem for his spiritual pilgrimage. The scary side of Bad Boy fame continued when 21-year-old Jamal Shine Barrow was convicted of 2 counts of assault, 2 gun possession charges, and 1 count of reckless endangerment in the Club New York court case where he was out partying with Diddy and Jennifer Lopez. While being interviewed by The Village Voice 1 week before Shine's verdict came down, Shine accused his former record label leader of betraying him in order to save his own self. In the last days of the trial, Shine admitted that he had a gun, stating that he pulled his gat, a 9mm Ruger loaded with hollow point bullets, only after a jealous clubgoer fired a gunshot intended to hit Diddy. Shine was convicted of attempted murder, assault, and reckless endangerment. Diddy was arrested too, but he was acquitted of all charges. This ordeal led to Shine's career screeching to a halt as he was sentenced to a decade in prison on June 1st, 2001, and he wouldn't see freedom outside of a prison cell until October 26th, 2009. When the reality of Shine's grim situation set in, he insisted on being released from his Bad Boy contract. P. Diddy has been known to sign several Harlem artists, from Mace to Black Rob. Somewhere between the street story of Black Rob and the smooth demeanor of Mace came the rapper Loon, himself a member of the rap group Harlem World that Mace handpicked and put an album out on. Loon's most memorable moments included his features on Diddy's I Need a Girl Parts 1 and 2, and landing a pair of 2002 R&B guest spots on Toni Braxton's single Hit the Freeway and 3LW's single I Do. 1 year after the 2003 release of Loon's self-titled debut solo album, Loon's next release would be his release from the label altogether. Speaking on his split with Bad Boy in an interview with The Breakfast Club, Loon said the following: "It was certain events that were taking place professionally and personally. I believe being in the presence of a person's life, Puff is a mogul. Puff has a huge impact on hip-hop and hip-hop history. To come from up underneath that, it's almost like Mission Impossible. It's very difficult for a person to give you your own identity when you're in the presence of somebody who actually is an artist himself. That's where people misconstrued the issues that come under Bad Boy, because your CEO is an artist." Similar to the religious transformations of Craig Mack and Mace towards Christianity and Shine's towards Judaism, Loon had his own when he converted to Islam in December 2008 after a trip to Abu Dhabi, UAE. Born Chauncey Lamont Hawkins, he officially changed his name to Amir Junaid Muhaddith after traveling to Mecca, Saudi Arabia. He ended his music career and relocated to Egypt until 2011. But even with Islam in his life, the quote-unquote bad boy curse plagued the man formerly known as Loon on November 22, 2011, when he was arrested during a trip to Brussels, Belgium, extradited to the United States in May of 2012, and was sentenced to 14 years imprisonment in July 2013 for conspiracy with intent to traffic 1 or more kilograms of heroin. Early freedom occurred when he was given an early release on July 29, 2020, in connection to the virus pandemic effects of the prison system. This bad boy curse energy even seemed to affect Mark Curry, a lesser-known former rapper on Bad Boy Records who made some appearances on Bad Boy Records and was a songwriter in Diddy's stable. Mark Curry, who also wrote a controversial book entirely about his past life at Bad Boy and his perception of P. Diddy with the cryptic title Dancing with the Devil, during an extended interview with the YouTuber named Giant, Mark Curry addressed some of the faulty business practices he claimed to witness at Bad Boy when he said, "I never been to the studio, amazingly. I never been to the studio to mix down one song, and no producer that ever produced a song for me has ever been paid for a track. So that just lets you know exactly how screwed my budget was. Mark Curry also spoke on the situation that the marquee hip hop player on Bad Boy, the notorious B.I.G., was in prior to his murder, when he shared Biggie Smalls had Junior Mafia, and Biggie Smalls also had a friend Andreas. So they were already starting their own record label before Biggie died. You remember, I believe, Biggie was getting into his own Brooklyn Mint clothing line and all of that. So Biggie was already on his way out the door, you know? And I just remember the stories of when Biggie would want money from Puff, and they would be doing a show, and Biggie wouldn't show up to the show until 10 minutes before the show. And Puff would be like, "Where's he at? Where's he at?" That's where he would get his leverage. Biggie knew that Puff needed him. If you break it down and look at the situation for what it truly is, Biggie Smalls made Bad Boy. Bad Boy is Biggie Smalls. When Mark Curry's book Dancing with the Devil came out, there were plenty of really juicy tidbits of alleged shady business. No time was wasted in spilling some information about Diddy when Mark Curry writes in the first chapter, even worse, Puff charged artists for his appearances on their records and in the videos, usually without their realizing it until they received their royalty statements. Imagine that. You'd think the CEO of your label, the guy who signed you, is there to support you. He's showing love by featuring on your song. He's showing up in the video, but when you get your check, you just realize he charged you for both of those. That's when they discovered that a large sum of their money had gone to fees which were doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled because of Puff's special guest appearances. He charged artists, for example, for having his Bentley in their videos, which he insisted upon, then took a tax credit for business use of the car. After looking at the life after Bad Boy and the results of so many rappers that rose and fell, or rose and died, the number of disheartening conclusions associated with one of the biggest rap-related labels ever hit another all-time low with the 2021 death of Black Rob at age 52. This wasn't bullet-riddled murder. It was a health-related kidney disorder that many feel could have been prevented had there been earlier healthcare money coming his way. Not only was Spanish Harlem's Black Rob a Bad Boy artist with a platinum debut album and a blockbuster single, Whoa, that was the anthem for the year 2000, some might say, but he had his ears firmly to the streets and was instrumental in rapper G.O.O.D getting signed to Diddy, releasing 2 albums on Bad Boy Records. Speaking of getting signed, what did Rob's deal look like? Black Rob signed to Bad Boy Records for $450,000. But that wasn't a 1-album deal. That was for 10 albums. Tragically, the same morning that DMX passed away, Power 105.1 radio personality DJ Self shared a video of Black Rob from a hospital bed expressing his well wishes for DMX. This led to a GoFundMe raising campaign getting created on Black Rob's behalf, who had not just medical needs but was apparently also homeless. Unfortunately, the GoFundMe never reached its goal. Believe it or not, Black Rob had already made his health problems public knowledge many, many years earlier. In 2015, Black Rob appeared on Sway in the Morning, where he admitted that he suffered from high blood pressure and a stroke, which would be his first stroke of 4. He'd been dealing with kidney issues for quite a while, and his 2006 incarceration made it even harder to get treatment, especially considering that Bad Boy apparently removed his health insurance. No matter where you stand on the whole so-called Bad Boy curse myth and the whole death of Bad Boy Records, the fact of the matter is that more than a handful of Diddy's most recognizable rappers sought spiritual healing, like Craig Mack, Mace, Loon, or Shine, physical healing, like Craig Mack and Black Rob, financial justice, like The Lox and Mace, or ended up in incarceration, like Shine, Loon, and Black Rob, after their time served on the label. Even the short-term Bad Boy artist G.O.O.D walked into a police precinct and confessed to murder 17 years later to clear his conscience. Whether there's a connection between the image of bad boys converted to good men to bring peace to their lives, or resting in peace, such as the notorious B.I.G., Craig Mack, and Black Rob, the evidence shows that for many, life after Bad Boy Records has really been a hard knock life. When Rick Ross was figuring out what to name his label, he decided on using the Maybach brand from Mercedes-Benz as inspiration. Maybachs are high-end luxury cars that are worth in excess of well over $170,000. This concept of glamour was not intended to tell his fans to run out and spend money that they don't have to buy, as he would call it, Maybach cars, but
To link the high quality associated with these coveted cars with the kind of quality that Ross believed was found in his artistic work, both in his sound and his commitment of time to create the Maybach Music Group, MMG. In the early 2010s, it appeared that MMG was on pace to really dominate the decade. The statistics said it all: 5 number one albums in 3 years, 7 albums in a 15-month span. They ranked higher than J. Cole's Dreamville label and even higher than TDE, home to Kendrick Lamar. Rick Ross's main artists included Meek Mill, Wale, Omarion, and Stolly, and they were highly visible and sought after by fans and artists alike. It seemed as though the Maybach music vocal tag on their songs was practically inescapable. Despite all of these accolades and a sprinting start, it never lived up, not even close to its potential. This was in part because Maybach Music Group and its leaders had their own challenges, even as they should have been able to better weather the storm. By the summer of 2010, Rick Ross could be heard all over the airwaves and inside every dance club, whether it was songs like BMF, MC Hammer, Super High, or Aston Martin music. It was clear that audiences loved Ross and could not wait to hear more. The hype around Ross was not simply due to the popularity of the singles he released or the fame attributed to his mafioso persona. Rick Ross' fourth album, Teflon Don, immediately captured the imaginations of audiences and was acclaimed as his best work yet, my favorite album by him. And while the album did not hit number one on the Billboard charts, it was admired and praised by both fans and critics. The record label imprint, Maybach Music Group, or MMG, would officially take shape in 2009 with distribution through Atlantic Records, which took over distribution following the expiration of a deal with Island Def Jam. In its early days, it appeared that the imprint was most interested in featuring the new faces of rap music and creating a space where already known names in the hip-hop industry could really level up their game. In total, the imprint would go on to release 19 solo albums, 3 compilation albums, 5 of which would be certified gold, and 3 of which would be certified platinum. Among the label's early artists, Triple C's and Mass Pike Miles were the first 2 signed to the imprint. Ross would then go on to pursue Wiz Khalifa, who was already signed to Atlantic Records. In the summer of 2009, Maybach Music Group would release its first album, Rick Ross's third studio album, Deeper Than Rap. Following this release, Ross decided to focus more of his attention on signing artists to his label. After signing Mass Pike Miles and rap group Triple C's, whose members included Gunplay, Torch, and Young Breed, Ross would go on to release Triple C's debut studio album, Custom Cars and Cycles. By 2011, Ross announced a series of big plans. On the day of the NFL Super Bowl, when the Green Bay Packers would secure a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers, Rick Ross would announce that rapper Wale had recently been signed to his Maybach Music Group. In Ross' memoir, Rick Ross wrote, "I first met Wale at King of Diamonds. Wale was a backpack rapper, so I was surprised to see him in a strip club, and I was even more surprised to hear his music booming in there. No Hands was a hit record, but it wasn't an accurate representation of Wale as an artist. Wale had depth. He could make the strip club anthem, but he also made songs that resonated with women on a deeper level. He was the poster boy of the blogs, but he also had the HBCUs and his hometown of Washington, D.C. behind him. His music paid tribute to his Nigerian heritage and had elements of go-go and spoken word poetry." A day after Ross's announcement about Wale, he also told the public that Meek Mill, a Philadelphia street rapper with some battle rap history, had also been signed to MMG as part of the label's growing roster. In 2011, Ross also confirmed that MMG would be launching Maybach Music Jamaica and Maybach Music Latino. He would then go on to sign the imprint's first reggae artist, Magazine. In March of that same year, Ross announced that he would continue to expand beyond hip-hop once more by signing R&B and soul singer Tidra Moses. Moses would be the imprint's first female artist. As the artist roster continued to grow, Maybach Music Group was slowly convincing the world that the imprint was but another growing hip-hop and entertainment empire. By 2012, fans would learn that French Montana had also signed a joint venture deal with Maybach Music Group and Bad Boy Records. Montana indicated that both Rick Ross and Diddy would executive produce his debut album, Excuse My French, which was set to be released in the fall through Interscope Records. But only a month later, it appeared that things were already getting rocky at Maybach Music Group when Ross revealed that Pill had departed from the imprint and that he had never even been signed in the first place. Ross stated that MMG had worked out a 1-year deal with Warner Brothers in which Pill would be a part of the Maybach team. By the mid-year point, things started to look up as Ross would go on to sign R&B star Omarion, a former boy band fan at B2K. Ross would also announce that MMG had 2 upcoming albums that would be released, Self-Made Volume 2 and God Forgives I Don't. That year, there were also rumors that the imprint was in talks to bring on rappers Dom Kennedy and Nipsey Hussle. One of the other rumors, that Rocky Fresh was in talks to join the label, actually did materialize, and Fresh would go on to release his mixtape Electric Highway in early January 2013. In regards to Rocky Fresh, Ross was on record stating, "Everybody can see a little bit of themselves in a Rocky Fresh, and that's how he presents his music. I like to say he has a system, and I'm sitting back and I'm watching all his videos, his virals, and I'm like, yo, this kid is really ready for the majors right here, because this is major. What I'm looking at is major, and I just wanted it to be organic." By late 2012, it appeared that matters at MMG were transforming yet again as Ross announced that the imprint was moving to Atlantic Records. Throughout 2013, MMG would go on to release a succession of material between singles, music videos, and a compilation album. Then in August 2013, Ross released MMG's 3rd collaboration album, Self-Made Volume 3. While the label was reasonably diverse, not all artists experienced the same level of success. Among the artists associated with MMG, Omarion's Post to Be was a huge summer smash, peaking at 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rapper Gunplay's Living Legend did not sell as well as expected, but many estimate that it was because of the extended wait for the album. While Rocky Fresh and Fat Trell were able to maintain interest in their music through underground appeal, the release of mixtapes, and consistent touring, fans lost interest with the lack of information on other official releases. While the label was flourishing, there was also drama brewing beneath the surface. The drama that was circulating at Maybach Music Group was in part due to an ongoing beef between MMG label mates Wale and Meek Mill. In July 2014, reports stated that Meek Mill called his colleague Wale a hater for not tweeting about his album. Some argued that Meek responded that way because he didn't like it when featured artists didn't tweet about his album. But others maintained that if Wale and Meek had been on good terms, Meek would not have responded as he did. In response, Wale went on Instagram and stated that he did support Meek and that it was instead Meek who did not respond. Shortly thereafter, Rick Ross stated publicly that he called both Meek Mill and Wale to discuss the issue, and everything had since been resolved. By October of 2015, Wale made a visit to the Breakfast Club, where he stated during an interview that Meek had brought a pencil to a gunfight in his ongoing beef with Canadian rapper Drake. Meek then took to Instagram, calling Wale a jealous clown. He proceeded to publicly state that Wale was not on Maybach Music Group and that he should jump off a roof. The pair used the platform to go back and forth. In response, Wale sarcastically subtweeted Meek in an attempt to diss and mock him. Yet again, Rick Ross publicly defended the two, claiming that they were brothers and the media should not pay attention to what was really an insignificant exchange. 2 years later, at Rick Ross's birthday, the media reported that Meek and Wale had made peace. Some argue that the situation between Wale and Meek Mill played out in much the same way that two middle managers would lobby for control at a growing startup while slighting each other constantly. In 2015, when he was asked why he did not intervene in the beef between Meek and Wale, Ross stated, "Because it was unnecessary. It's just like being a big brother. Just like every day in the studio with my homies. It's always, that's just the type of vibe we are. But that's not personal. But most definitely speak your mind. And if you got to get emotional and speak and make your point, you do that. Whatever it is. But this the squad. This the empire. It'll never go no further than that. We'll never shed no blood." In his discussion of the beef, Ross suggested that his intervention would have only been needed if the conflict between Wale and Meek Mill had escalated, and there was a threat of bloodshed or violence. He explained that when the beef unfolded, both rappers were at an emotional crossroads in their lives. On the one hand, Wale was frustrated by the lack of progress in his career. This feeling was made worse by his ongoing battle with depression and substance abuse. Meek, on the other hand, was bogged down with legal troubles and his ongoing beef with Drake. In the height of Maybach Music Group's fame and visibility, Ross was still signed to Def Jam and contractually obligated to release albums according to the terms and conditions that had been set. Unlike other label arrangements where a non-artist was in a critical leadership role, as is the case of Dreamville CEO Ibrahim Hamad or Chief Operating Officer Steve Pomone, who runs Parkwood Entertainment alongside Beyonce, Rick Ross decided to run Maybach Music Group entirely on his own. Along with the music, Ross navigated his own legal issues and managed his own non-music business ventures. Taking on all that responsibility led to a tremendous amount of stress. To deal with the pressure of all these responsibilities, Ross decided to begin taking codeine. Beginning in 2011, his drug use eventually led to Ross experiencing several seizures that led to the musician being hospitalized a number of times. In order to get healthier, Ross stopped taking codeine, began losing weight, and took medication that had been previously prescribed to him. These health and well-being challenges, as well as the lack of an effective label structure, really stunted the growth of MMG. When asked in a 2017 Billboard Music interview about what he thought were his biggest mistakes as Maybach Music Group CEO, Ross answered, just as a CEO and a boss, a lot of times you don't follow budgets. You'll just spend money based on your passion and your heart. A lot of times it doesn't work. It could be extremely faulty versus pacing yourself. You gotta pace yourself. You gotta make sure that the music connects as an artist instead of just going off the rip. Ross might have been referring to a number of decisions that he made in the early 2010s. First, some estimate that he might have been talking about his failure to sign rapper Wiz Khalifa in 2010, which was stunted by a lack of resources, particularly money to compete with what major record labels were able to offer. Others have estimated that Ross might have been referring to MMG's decision to sign Omarion, who in 2014 had a wildly popular single with Post to Be, but then failed to follow up that recording with something anywhere near as successful. Others still have referred to Maybach Music Group's inability to assist Meek Mill while he was experiencing legal challenges. Others argue that it was Rick Ross's laissez-faire leadership style over Maybach Music Group that generated trouble for his label. Unlike Cash Money CEO Birdman, Rick Ross also functioned as an artist-friendly executive. However, as a result of this leadership style, relationships with artists could be made difficult, especially if the founder had to make difficult decisions. In the case of Meek Mill, Ross's management style resulted in the rapper being unable to meet his full potential as a result of an absence of Ross mentorship. Ross also was absent when Meek Mill fell into personal struggles, and when Ross's two artists, Meek and Wale, fell into trouble with one another, Ross did not step in to rectify the beef. While Meek Mill had been signed to Maybach Music Group since 2011, reports had circulated for months once it appeared that there were tensions brewing between Rick Ross and Meek Mill over a possible contract dispute with the imprint Maybach Music Group. Reports indicated that at Meek Mill's birthday party, he had blocked Ross from entering due to allegedly refusing to let him out of his MMG contract. A few months after these rumors began circulating, Ross publicly denied that the two had tensions growing between them. In an interview Ross gave on The Morning Hustle, he explained the nature of his relationship with Meek, stating, "I feel like we're both hustlers. That's one thing about life. You either grow together or grow apart. As a boss, you make that decision because whatever it is you want to do, Ricky Rose wants to see you do it." Ross also explained that if it was true that Meek had label issues, those challenges would not be with MMG. Instead, those issues would be the ones that Meek would have to iron out with Atlantic Records. Ross then elaborated by saying, "I'm gonna be honest, when Meek taking a jab at anybody, the only way I can assume he's doing that at is Atlantic Records. All we ever did was get paper, and it's really easy to say somebody's name, ain't nothing to. You feel me? I know what it is when me and Meek always got money. He a boss now. We done been down 10 years. Is he signed to Maybach Music? Yes, he is. But he's also a boss. And real bosses give other bosses opportunities to become bigger bosses. Go, man. Go buy the biggest stuff in Dubai, man. Let's go be billionaires. And if I'm only going to get 7 billion and you get 20 billion, God is great. That's all it is. Is it any pressure? It ain't no pressure. And always remember, it's real easy to make it clear when it's pressure." By 2018, reports emerged that Maybach Music Group rapper Wale had parted ways with Atlantic Records. At the time, Atlantic did not confirm whether Wale had been dropped from the label or whether the decision to split was mutually agreed upon by the artist and label. During his time signed to Maybach Music Group, and therefore under the umbrella of Atlantic Records, Wale had released 3 albums: The Gifted, Album About Nothing, and Shine. During his time as an MMG rapper signed to Atlantic, Wale had 2 albums debut at number 1, several platinum singles including Lotus Flower Bomb and Bad, and gold records, some of which include My PYT and The Matrimony. But during his time in this contract, Wale struggled, particularly in the area of sales. Since his release of The Gifted, Wale's music experienced a significant decline in popularity. at least commercially. Case in point, his album Shine sold less than 30,000 copies in its first week. As a result, many suspected that might have been what led to his departure from the label. However, one point that can be made is Wale's album Folarin 2 had sold 20K first week towards the end of 2021, which is after many rules were changed that didn't apply to the album Shine. And these are rules that were used to enhance Billboard first week album sales. We're not sure whether or not Wale is still on MMG. When we said departure from the label, we were talking about Atlantic, and then he went over to Warner, but he was still signed with MMG. However, he's definitely released more than 5 albums with MMG, which is what standard record deals come across. So perhaps he may be on the way out or already out of Maybach Music Group as a record label. And if that is the case, then this just shows how dwindling of a label that Rick Ross currently has. When Rick Ross signed Omarion back in 2012, the momentum at the time was overwhelming. However, his presence on MMG was largely underwhelming. Case in point was when Omarion dropped MIA featuring Wale, which received little to no support. In the midst of the record failing to do well, Omarion told the crew at the Breakfast Club that this was due to MMG moving from Warner to Atlantic Records. However, even in 2013, with the release of Know You Better featuring Fabulous and Pusha, Omarion's music still did not do well, in part because the record was not pushed the way it should have been. This changed with the single Post to Be featuring Chris Brown and Jhené Aiko. In the case of this record, while MMG did not push it either, Omarion decided to push the record. As a result, the song became a tremendous hit. During an interview on Vlad TV, Omarion gave MMG little to no credit for his success during his time at Maybach Music Group. Instead, Omarion claimed that he was now 100% independent and signed to his own label, Omarion Worldwide. By 2021, Stolly, Rick Ross's former signee, announced that he had found a new label home with Mellow Music Group. The Ohio rapper told Billboard, "I'm very excited about the situation and the opportunity with Mellow Music Group. Partnering with Mellow Music at this stage of my career is a blessing. As a label, they let you be yourself and let you be an artist, while also helping you expand independently." This move to Mellow Music Group came 5 years after his 2016 mixtape, Saving Yourself, released off Ross's MMG imprint. Reports indicated that in 2017, Stolly quietly parted ways with MMG after having been signed to the imprint since 2011, when he was part of a then-growing roster that included Meek Mill, Wale, and Atlanta rapper Pill. Among some of the albums that were promised and yet unreleased on Maybach Music Group was Tidra Moses' 2004 lead album, The Empress Pride. Even though she was technically under contract for only one song, Britney labeled herself the first lady of Maybach Music. Ultimately, she would only go on to release one song during her time on the label, and interestingly enough, the release was not a track affiliated with Maybach Music. In addition to Moses, Texas artist Just Britney was also promised the ability to record as well. There was also a rumor that Ross had big release plans for Dancehall Artist Magazine back in 2011. While Magazine worked on a few recordings and mixtapes in 2011, nothing has been announced since 2015. There were also indications that both Ross and Drake were in talks to generate an album. However, sources later learned that the two had never done a record together for what was rumored to be an album titled YOLO. In addition, many were aware of Ross's intention to sign the Pittsburgh rapper Wiz Khalifa in 2010. While the two did record music together in Ross's studio, Khalifa never did sign to MMG in the end. One of the albums that seemed to have promise was one that was to have a joint venture between Rick Ross and Birdman. Back in 2013, the two released a joint mixtape that both artists had been discussing since 2008. Immediately after recording the material, they released it and spoke about releasing Volume 2 in the next year. Unfortunately, Volume 2 never did get released, in part due to the tension between the two artists. In 2013, both Tracy T and Fat Trel signed to MMG, though Tracy T did release an official single titled 16 with Meek back in 2013. While Tracy T admitted that he was prepared to release a mixtape, he was less sure about releasing an album. By 2014, rapper Fat Trel appeared on a number of tracks as a guest appearance and in a few live concerts, though he never appeared on an official Maybach Music album, and he's consistently been in and out of jail or prison, so that's made it difficult for him to catch his stride. But today, there doesn't seem to be any upside to Maybach Music. There hasn't been an artist signed to them in years. and by years, I would say 6, 7, 8+ years. The current crop of artists are more so legacy acts, we could say, when we're talking about Meek Mill, for instance, and Rick Ross. And it seems like Rick Ross's business ventures have taken a bigger hold of how he prioritizes things as opposed to the music side when it comes to signing new artists and being on the ball with that.
When we think about the roots of internet rap, it's difficult to do that without thinking about how the hip hop crew Odd Future really optimized that lane through their loud, free form, out of sync production, and really personalities. Aside from their out of the box practices and imagery, it seemed that Odd Future was able to think ahead to a time when access to music, crafting an online audience, lifestyle branding, and the world of content creation would be just as, if not more than, making music and culture itself. In addition to their creative efforts, Odd Future poured their energy into all kinds of DIY entrepreneurial efforts, including clothing, pop-up shops for merch, stickers, and even television shows to feed their audience's appetite for their artistry. While Odd Future is not hip-hop's first, you could say, alternative rap group, nor are they the first to use shock value in entertainment to drive interest, they were among the first to take those qualities, package it, and translate them into sustainable and successful career trajectories. So if this crew was so instrumental in changing hip-hop landscape in everything from music to fashion to content to personalities, then what led to its untimely and unfortunate demise? Odd Future, a collective also known as Odd Future Wolfgang, began its journey as a crew in Los Angeles in around 2007. The group's original members, artists Tyler the Creator, Haji, and Casey Veggies, DJ Left Brain, production team The Super 3, Matt Martians and Pyramid Vritra, and hype man Jasper Dolphin, also worked alongside other members who would join at a later date, including people like Earl Sweatshirt, Frank Ocean, Mike G, Brandon Deshay and Domo Genesis, DJ Taco Bennett, DJ and producer Sid the Kid, and hype man Nikel Smith, who would eventually become a skateboarder in his own right as well as a rapper. Odd Futures also included various cinematography, photography, acting, and fashion designers such as Rob Nasty, Lego Head, Sagan Lockhart, L-Boy, Lucas Vercetti, Julian Berman, and Poncho. While the collective is large, much of the attention that Odd Future garnered was due to the building popularity and growing success of Tyler the Creator, Frank Ocean, and Earl Sweatshirt's careers. One of the markers of the group's success was their capacity to use the internet in order to achieve exposure, visibility, interest, and most especially to generate a tremendous amount of loyalty from their fan base. Many agree that it was this kind of approach to building a fan base that ultimately allowed the group to break through a number of obstacles and achieve mainstream fame. Even before it became fashionable to let audiences into the behind-the-scenes happenings in your personal and professional life, using social media apps such as Instagram, Snapchat, hell, even kind of Twitter, Odd Future used platforms such as Tumblr and YouTube to grant fans access to their lives. Whether it was through photos or videos, fans could watch as the group collaborated together, skateboarded, ate meals, or simply took some time out from work. By generating this kind of intimacy with their fans, Odd Future quickly moved from a group of friends to a group of cult stars who treated their fans as though they were a part of the Odd Future family, at least digitally. Beginning in 2008 and through to 2010, the crew would deliver a series of solo projects in addition to their collaborative and self-released debut mixtape titled The Odd Future Tape. At the top of 2008, Odd Future would begin by releasing a solo project from Casey Veggies titled Customized Greatly Volume 1, featuring Tyler the Creator. A short time later, in July of 2009, fellow member Haji would also go on to release his debut mixtape titled The Dina Tape. In addition to Haji's solo work, Tyler the Creator would also go on to release his debut mixtape, Bastard. By 2010, the collective would together release their second mixtape titled Radical. By 2010, the collective began to gain widespread attention. In November of 2010, Odd Future would complete a two-stop tour, first in London, then in New York City. The crew became well known for concerts that shared common ground with punk rock performances. Case in point, alongside the music, audiences could find the collective stage diving and moshing to excite the crowd. In addition to the release of their 2012 debut studio album, The Odd Future Tape Volume 2, fans also tuned in for Odd Future's Adult Swim comedy skit show called Loiter Squad, and the development of their clothing line. As the collective continued to grow with the addition of Chicago-based rapper Brandon Deshay, Los Angeles rapper and songwriter Domo Genesis, Earl Sweatshirt, and LA singer-songwriter Frank Ocean, so too did Odd Future's fan base. Rapper and record producer Tyler the Creator is perhaps Odd Future's most well-known contributor. After co-founding alternative hip-hop collective Odd Future, he and groupmates Haji, Left Brain, and Casey Veggies would release their first mixtape in 2008. After releasing his debut solo mixtape Bastard the following year, which ranked 32nd on Pitchfork's Media's Top Albums of 2010, and then his debut studio album titled Goblin, Tyler the Creator would go on to sign a joint deal with Red Distribution and Sony Music Entertainment as a solo artist, as well as for his label Odd Future Records. By early 2011, Tyler the Creator shared his music video for Yonkers, which received significant attention from a number of online media outlets. As a result of this release, Tyler the Creator would go on to win Best New Artist for Yonkers at the 2011 MTV Video Music Awards, and yet despite the win, audiences' reaction to Tyler the Creator's work was a mix. Known initially for his gritty horrorcore influenced material, especially in terms of the content on his first two solo projects, some popular culture critics took issue with his material and criticized him for the use of certain slurs in his lyrics, although back then, people were a lot less sensitive to these things. Tyler the Creator, however, vehemently rejected the connection that some were making, and he refuted the attempt to categorize him as part of the horrorcore scene. Since then, Tyler the Creator has been associated with a variety of genres, including alternative hip-hop, bedroom pop, jazz, rap, R&B, and even neo-soul. This has been in part because of the transformations in his production. Over the years, Tyler the Creator has moved from gritty and dark sounds to a much more jazzy and soulful sonic approach, aided by the fact that he produces pretty much all of his records. He's disclosed that his sound has been deeply influenced by Eminem and Pharrell of the Neptunes. In fact, Tyler the Creator cites Pharrell's 2006 debut solo album In My Mind as the inspiration that led him to co-found the Odd Future Collective. By early 2011, Tyler the Creator had caught the eyes and ears of many in the industry. Among some of the figures that took a keen interest were Steve Rifkin, Jimmy Iovine, Rick Ross, and Jay-Z. The attention would lead Tyler the Creator to release his first studio album, as well as his Odd Future collaborators to sign with Red Distribution and Sony. As the attention increased in 2011, Tyler the Creator could be found on television, making his debut on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, as well as establishing his own TV show in collaboration with Odd Future called Loiter Squad on Cartoon Network. On September 8, 2011, that crew debuted their 15-minute live-action show composed of various sketches, man-on-the-street segments, pranks, and music made by Odd Future. In addition to television, in 2012, Tyler started Golf Wang, his clothing company, and he began hosting Camp Flog Gnaw Carnival, an annual music festival. Eventually, these ideas would expand into much larger initiatives, including Golf Media, his own streaming service app at a point, named, which contained his own original scripted series and a live stream of each Camp Flog Gnaw Carnival. And we also have to address the fan-made part of this, which one of the most popular forums for music at the time was Odd Future Talk. Between 2013 and 2019, Tyler the Creator delivered a significant amount of musical material. He would usually drop a project every 2 years. On the solo front, these albums included Wolf, Cherry Bomb, Flower Boy, Igor, and most recently Call Me If You Get Lost, all of which were released to widespread critical acclaim, as well as commercially getting better and better. In addition to his own work, in 2017, Tyler the Creator worked with Frank Ocean to create the recording Biking, and he then wrote and performed the theme song for scientist Bill Nye's new show, Bill Nye Saves the World. He would also go on to create a collaborative project titled Wangsap with A$AP Rocky, though it was not until 2019 when he released his fifth studio album, Igor, that Tyler the Creator had his first #1 album in the United States. Also, Wangsap never really came out. An album that would lead to the artist winning in the Best Rap Album category at the Grammys, which was his first Grammy and a goal that he had been looking forward to since the inception of his career. One of his most interesting marketing tactics to date was upon the release of his sixth studio album, Call Me If You Get Lost. In an attempt to generate attention to his new creative work, Tyler the Creator placed billboards in a number of major cities across the globe. The billboards contained a phone number that audiences could call and listen to a recorded conversation between the artist and his mother. Audiences soon learned that the recording was also included in the album as the recording Mama Talk. The album, which debuted at number 1 on the US Billboard 200, would go on to receive widespread critical acclaim and ultimately become the rapper's second number 1 album in the United States. When Tyler the Creator invited Earl Sweatshirt to join Odd Future, he was originally known by the stage name Sly Tendencies. As his rap career progressed, he would go on to change in 2009 to Earl Sweatshirt, and he would then go on to develop his career as a rapper, songwriter, and record producer. Earl was initially discovered by fellow rapper Tyler the Creator, who found him while visiting his MySpace account, where he admitted that he was a big fan of his work. Earl would initially gain acclaim and recognition at the age of 16 following the release of his 2010 debut mixtape Earl, which was produced by Tyler the Creator. The album would gain so much attention that Complex Magazine would name it its 24th best album of 2010. However, despite his newfound fame, shortly after he released his first piece of artwork, his mother decided to send him to a boarding school, Coral Reef Academy, a therapeutic retreat school for at-risk boys outside of the Samoan capital of Apia, for getting into trouble with friends. Despite the support of fans, reports increasingly began to stir that Earl had stopped making music with Odd Future, all of which was supported by posts that Tyler the Creator had made on Twitter and Formspring platforms. According to Tyler, the reason for Earl's decision to stop working with the collective was because his mother refused to grant permission to release any of Earl's music while he was at Coral Reef Academy. Earl was expected to earn back his privileges as well as the ability to return home. And even while he could not make music with Odd Future, reports indicate that he wrote rhymes that would eventually form as part of his only contribution to Odd Future's mixtape, The Odd Future Tape Volume 2. Earl would eventually return to Los Angeles after a 2-year absence in 2012. Fans were alerted to his return after rumors spread and a video surfaced on YouTube that included a preview of a new song. In the video, fans were told that if they wanted the full thing, they would have to give him 50,000 followers on Twitter. Upon his return in February of 2012, Earl decided to rejoin the collective Odd Future, where he began producing new music. This return would ultimately lead to the release of his debut studio album titled Doris in 2013. In their review of the album, Pitchfork was noted as writing, "Doris gets as much of its jollies from settling into the dark, forbidding soundscapes as it does from unexpectedly ripping us up out of them. Without the noirish serial killer stories of earlier work to fall back on, Earl has discovered new ways to shock and disorient the listener." His second album, I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, would follow 2 years later, and then Earl would release his third album, titled Some Rap Songs, 3 years after that. In addition to working alongside Tyler the Creator, Earl Sweatshirt was featured in work alongside different artists like Frank Ocean, Domo Genesis of Odd Future, The Alchemist, Vince Staples, who he's been collaborating with since his first mixtape, Action Bronson, and many others. By September 2013, Complex had named Earl the 10th best producer in hip-hop, and critics showered him with praise. Case in point, his project Doris debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200, and it earned a perfect score in both The Guardian and the Los Angeles Times for its rhyme schemes, lyrics, and the gritty underground production. Frank Ocean. After Tyler the Creator, one of the members who's perhaps just as visible, if not more, and well-liked is Christopher Bro, also known professionally as Frank Ocean. The singer, songwriter, and rapper was loved by many of his fans for his idiosyncratic music style, introspective songwriting, and his incredibly wide vocal range. Beginning his music career as a ghostwriter, Frank Ocean would eventually go on to join Odd Future in 2010 and then release his critically acclaimed debut mixtape, Nostalgia, in 2011. This success would eventually lead to the performer securing a recording contract with Def Jam Records. This trajectory would inevitably lead to the success of the widely popular debut album Channel Orange in 2012, which won Best Urban Contemporary Album at the 2013 Grammy Awards. Despite his relatively quick rise to acclaim and visibility, Frank Ocean would then decide to take a 4-year hiatus from the public eye, and it would not be until 2016 when Frank Ocean would return with the release of his visual project Endless. Many argue that Frank Ocean's return in 2016 was only intended to fulfill contractual obligations with his label Def Jam. Shortly thereafter, that is only a day later, the artist would go on to self-release his highly anticipated second album, Blonde. The album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and was certified platinum since. Beginning in 2006, Frank Ocean began establishing himself as a songwriter under the name Lonnie Bro. After getting a songwriting deal, he would start generating artistic materials for Justin Bieber, Beyonce, John Legend, and Brandy. Frank Ocean was writing so much for people that he was on record stating, "There was a point when I was composing for other people, and it might have been comfy to continue to do that and enjoy that income stream and the anonymity. But that's not why I moved away from school and away from family." By the time he had joined the collective Odd Future in 2009, Frank Ocean would go on to adopt the artistic name of Frank Ocean. Once he was part of the collective and working alongside Tyler, the Creator, Frank Ocean's songwriting was reinvigorated. This would ultimately lead to him meeting Tricky Stewart in 2009, who would then help him sign a writing contract with Def Jam Records. While working with the label, Frank Ocean would put out a series of materials that would lead to a number of outlets writing highly favorable reviews of his work. For instance, NPR noted that Ocean's songwriting is smart and subtle, setting him apart from the pack, while Rolling Stone would say that he was a gifted avant R&B smoothie, whatever the hell that means. As he came to greater fame and visibility, Frank Ocean worked collaboratively with many of the most notable popular culture members and began expanding his sound. In addition to Tyler, the Creator, and members of Odd Future, prior to the release of his debut studio album in 2012, he also worked with Kanye West and Jay-Z on their joint Watch the Throne, and Bridget Kelly. By 2012, Frank Ocean's first studio album, Channel Orange, demonstrated that the artist was working with a dense musical fusion of various sounds that included jazz, soul, and R&B, funk, and even electronic music. The only featured female artist in Odd Future, Sydney Lauren Bennett, known professionally as Syd, formerly Syd the Kid, first joined Odd Future and then later founded her own band, The Internet, in 2011. First making music while she was still living with her parents, Syd would work in a supportive capacity in much of her career until 2017, when she released her first debut solo single, All About Me, and debut solo album, Fiend. In addition to working with Odd Future, Syd would also work with other international artists, including Korean R&B artist Dean in his music video for Love, Lil Uzi Vert's second studio album, Eternal, a take on his song Urgency, and When Love's Around, and even on pop artist Zayn Malik's third album, Nobody's Listening. In a 2017 XXL article, when asked about the rise and fall of Odd Future and her eventual departure from the group in 2016, Syd stated that she always believed what they were doing was special and important and historic, though it was touring that tore the collective apart. She went on to state, "Stuff got out of hand when we started touring. Most of us never had money and had never been on tour, and it was a lot to take in. We were kids, still are." In an earlier interview in 2016 with the New York Times, Syd admitted that she felt lonely in the group. She stated, "I couldn't talk to any of them about it. We weren't all that close, and they never seemed to want to hear it." And finally, when she did decide to leave, she claimed that the collective was not about her departure because they felt they lost their get-out-of-jail-free card. They weren't happy about it. It's easy to say they aren't homophobic because Syd is there. In addition to the more well-known artists in the group, Odd Future featured Dominique Marquise Cole, also known as Domo Genesis. After joining the collective in mid-2009, Domo Genesis would release a series of mixtapes, including Under the Influence in 2011, provide features on the albums of the other artists, and make television appearances on Odd Future's Loiter Squad as Young Gunshot. By 2016, Domo would go on to release the lead single Dapper, featuring Anderson .Paak, to his debut solo album, Genesis, and would then embark on a tour in support of its release. Since the group disbanded, Domo Genesis has independently released a mixtape titled Aren't You Glad You're You on SoundCloud, which was executive produced by rapper Evidence, and in 2021, Domo Genesis was featured on Tyler, the Creator's sixth album, Call Me If You Get Lost. The collaboration marked the first time the Odd Future members had worked with one another on a song since the collective had disbanded. Casey Veggies. Like many of the earliest members of Odd Future, Casey Jones, better known by his stage name Casey Veggies, began his career by releasing 5 independent mixtapes in 2007 under LA clothing and management company Peas and Carrots. As a founding member of Odd Future, he also appeared on the collective's first joint project, The Odd Future Tape. After contributing to this project, Casey would branch out on his own. In an interview with Respect magazine, Casey responded to questions about departing from Odd Future. "It's hard to explain, really, but I just had more of a different vision for my own rap career. I wanted to do my own thing." Once Casey was off on his own, he could be found working alongside, whether on record or tour, with artists like YG, Mac Miller, Wiz Khalifa, and many more. In addition to other artists, Casey would also occasionally work with fellow Odd Future members Tyler, the Creator, Haji Beats, and Domo Genesis. By 2013, Casey would sign a record deal with VIC and Epic Records. Then there's the death of Odd Future. By mid-2015, many news outlets were questioning whether Odd Future was still a unit. Many reporters noted that Tyler, the Creator, and Earl Sweatshirt had not recorded any music as a duo since 2013, and it had been nearly a year since Frank Ocean had parted ways from Odd Future managers Christian and Kelly Clancy, which some merely attributed to his reclusive nature. Unlike other hip-hop breakups, Odd Future's story was not smeared with major beef and animosity between members, shady money dealings, or members being pitted against one another over media scandals. Instead, it appeared that the members were straying further and further away from one another, a distance that some attributed simply to young adults being busily involved with their own lives and interests, and ultimately growing apart as a result of a difference in personality. This sentiment was perhaps most evident in a Fader cover story where Tyler, commenting on Frank Ocean's departure from the group, said he could care less about the spotlight type stuff, which is cool. I wish I had taken his route and just disappeared from social media for the past year. I got too much stuff going on, but that would be so tight. In some instances, reporters argue that one of the reasons the group didn't last was because this collective of quote-unquote misfits, as they called them, did not fit well into the conventional concept of a rap group. In many ways, the group was understood more so as kind of punk rock within hip-hop. They'll be united with the audience based on a shared sense of angst, exclusion from what was mainstream initially, and a desire to rage against the status quo conventions. Others suggested that when Odd Future's crew member Earl Sweatshirt was taken away and sent to complete his reformative sentence at Coral Reef Academy, it shook the group. Reports suggested that they had felt as though they had lost a family member. Although he returned 2 years later, the group may have been reunited in physical form, but they were increasingly drifting apart, especially the more well-known the Odd Future collective got, and fans gravitated more strongly to some members over others. For many fans, Tyler was the star and representative of Odd Future. Reports suggest that the first sign of animosity brewing between group members was when Haji called Tyler, the Creator, out at the 4th annual Camp Flog Gnaw Carnival, labeling Tyler a fraud who turned his back on members of the crew for no apparent reason. However, reports indicated that the tensions which appeared publicly on the annual Camp Flog Gnaw stage had also been stirring for months and had led to a breakdown in the functionality of the collective. Tyler, the Creator's star was getting bigger, and in some cases, he had become an obstacle for other members to overcome, and as a result, many in Odd Future found it difficult to live in his shadow. For Earl, a member who was absent for a significant portion of the collective's rise to fame, it may have been difficult for him to adapt to Tyler's celebrity star, in part because he has less time to get used to the idea upon his return. Other reports indicated that once Earl returned to LA from his reformative sentence, he had changed his mind about the use of music that portrayed murder and many other dark concepts. Many attribute this transformation to his recent work with survivors while in Samoa. Stumbling over his words while conducting an interview, Earl Sweatshirt stated, "There's nothing you can't evade, there's no defense if you have any ounce of humanity." As a result of his recent experiences, both Tyler and Earl increasingly had differing opinions on the use of violent subject matter. While Odd Future fans expected Earl to jump back into his work with the collective immediately, the artist instead decided to sign his own record deal and establish his own imprint. Upon learning the news of Earl's return, Tyler's messages on Twitter indicated that he had mixed emotions about Earl's uneasy transition back into the collective. In his tweets, Tyler stated, "I've never been excited and angry at the same time until today. That's a messed feeling. Everyone wants me to tweet something right now. F everything else. I just want to go skate and talk about the past year. F the music and the public. This stuff sucks. Y'all have no idea." Tyler publicly accepted that he and Earl grew apart and had changed in their individual lives. Then, by May of 2015, the group officially announced that they had terminated their relationship. News of the breakup came as a result of a set of tweets on Tyler, the Creator's account. In the tweets, Tyler suggested that Odd Future was over. Fans began to connect the dots. Many argue that despite news of the collective's breakup, the positive news was that it might lead to albums from other members, including Mike G and the internet. With the massive success of Tyler, the Creator, Earl Sweatshirt, and Frank Ocean, Odd Future continued to have a bright future as individuals, whereas Earl Sweatshirt kind of faded back towards more of an underground sound in terms of commercial success. Frank Ocean really hasn't done music in many years, and Tyler, the Creator, continued to go on to potentially really be a superstar that everyone always expected him to be. When we think about the rap crew G Unit, we're tapping into an interesting career filled with friendship, feuds, legal scandals, and most importantly, massive success. Longtime friends and East Coast rappers 50 Cent, Tony Yayo, and Lloyd Banks will always be remembered for not only their drama and their boldness, but also the output of music and the quality to which they were rapping. Whether it was the story of their lead rapper 50 Cent being blackballed from the music industry for his brash behavior, then losing his record deal, or the group going off to record music independently amidst feuds with some of hip hop's biggest names, G Unit Records remains one of the most well known crews to grace the early 2000s. So, how did this dynamic group come to be, and what led to the label's eventual demise? In the early 2000s, rap crew G Unit, short for Guerrilla Unit, the type of warfare, began by releasing a number of mixtapes which included 50 Cent is the Future, God's Plan, and No Mercy, No Fear, all of which were released in 2002, prior to 50 Cent even coming out with his debut Get Rich or Die Tryin'. That same year, 50 Cent was discovered by superstar Detroit rapper Eminem. 50 Cent, the solo rapper, would go on to sign a $1 million contract with Shady Records, which was under the umbrella of Dr. Dre's Aftermath Entertainment and Interscope Records. Immediately thereafter, 50 Cent's major label debut, Get Rich or Die Tryin', became a critical and commercial success that sold over 4 million copies in the United States alone and was later certified quadruple platinum by the RIAA. 50 was then given his own record label, a decision that ultimately led to the creation of G Unit Records. After opening up for business, 50 Cent immediately signed his longtime friends Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo to the label. Each of the group's founding members, all of whom had been rapping together since they were teenagers, were all born and raised in South Jamaica, a section of Queensboro, New York City. While the members of G Unit began working on their debut album immediately, Tony Yayo was unfortunately unable to record new material given that he was incarcerated. He did, however, make 2 appearances on the album, both of which used pre-recorded material. In Tony Yayo's place on the album, 50 Cent decided to sign Tennessee-based rapper Young Buck to both G Unit Records and to the group. Young Buck would be included as a featured member throughout G Unit's 2003 debut album titled Beg for Mercy, as well as their first major label appearance as a group on the remix to 50 Cent's single PIMP. Their debut studio album featured guest appearances from R&B singers Joe and Butch Cassidy, and production from producers such as High Tech, Dr. Dre, and Scott Storch. The album would go on to sell over 3.9 million units in the US and 5.8 million copies worldwide. It would later be certified quadruple platinum by the RIAA as well. The group's debut album also allowed members other than 50 Cent, namely Tony Yayo, Young Buck, and Lloyd Banks, to have a platform for their respective solo work that would follow, such as The Hunger for More, that released in 2004, Straight Outta Cashville, also 2004, and Thoughts of a Predicate Felon in 2005. In April 2008, in an interview with Shauna Leviste, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, of Hot 97 FM, 50 Cent commented that Young Buck was still signed to G Unit Records even though he was no longer a member of G Unit. 50 Cent told the press that Young Buck would no longer be a part of G Unit as a result of his excessive spending and inconsistent behavior. In his interview with Shauna, 50 Cent claimed that Young Buck was publicly stating that he had not been paid royalty checks and had been behaving in a strange way. Case in point, he appeared on stage with his former Cash Money label mate Lil Wayne, and then shortly after that appearance he dissed him on records with G Unit. 50 Cent claimed that these were among some of the main reasons G Unit decided that it would be best to remove him. 2 months later, on June 17, 2008, Young Buck responded to 50 Cent's allegation. He responded in the form of a song titled Taped Conversation. On the recording, The Game was also featured. The two used the recording to take shots at 50 Cent, Lloyd Banks, and Tony Yayo. When G Unit released their second album, TOS, Terminate on Sight, on July 1st, 2008, Young Buck still appeared on a few recordings despite the fact that the rapper had been ousted out of the group. While the songs had been previously recorded, Young Buck was still credited for his participation as a featured artist. Alongside Young Buck's features, the album also included reggae singer Mavado, and production came from artists such as Swizz Beatz, Street Radio, The Business, Rick Rock, and Polo the Don. By August 8, 2008, the album would go on to sell 507,000 copies in the United States. During the production of G-Unit's album Beg for Mercy, Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine of Interscope Records discovered Los Angeles rapper The Game. Like other early members of G-Unit Records, rapper The Game was also added to the group after both Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine proposed the idea in late 2003. The agreed-upon plan was to market The Game as a devotee of 50 Cent's camp of artists. This would lead to The Game making his first appearances as a member of G-Unit on Lloyd Banks and Young Buck's debut albums, The Hunger for More and Straight Outta Cashville. By 2004, The Game would go on to work on his debut album, which was set to be executive produced by 50 Cent and Dr. Dre. Later that year in November, The Game would find tremendous success with his second single off the album, How We Do, which featured 50 Cent and became a top 5 hit on the Billboard charts. But it wouldn't take long before tensions began to rise between The Game and members of G-Unit. Beginning in 2005, reports indicated that shortly after the release of The Game's debut album, The Documentary, tensions between 50 Cent and The Game had escalated into a full-scale feud. However, this feud was not new. Rather, it had been brewing prior to The Game's first album, The Documentary. Upon The Game's debut release, 50 Cent made public that he felt The Game was disloyal for publicly articulating that he did not want to participate in and support G-Unit's feud with other rappers. 50 Cent was also bothered by the fact that The Game had even expressed interest in working with artists like Nas and Jadakiss, with whom G-Unit was feuding. By 2005, 50 Cent announced to the press that The Game had been kicked out of G-Unit. Among the accusations flying about was that 50 Cent had not received full credit for the creation of the documentary and writing 6 songs on The Game's debut album. Upon hearing of these accusations, The Game denied that this had been the case. As the beef heated up, The Game decided to confront 50 Cent at New York City's Hot 97 studio. Reports indicated that members of The Game's entourage had shot at 50 Cent and other members of the G-Unit entourage. Members of 50 Cent's crew had no choice but to flee the building, and in the midst of the encounter, Hot 97 radio security accidentally shot a member of The Game's entourage. Following this near-deadly encounter, 50 Cent and The Game decided to hold a press conference on March 9, 2005 to announce their reconciliation and decision to call for a truce. Fans had mixed feelings about the entire situation and what appeared to be an attempt to squash their very public feud. Some fans believed that the two had manufactured this beef as a publicity stunt to boost the sales of their 2 albums, both of which had just been released. Those suspicions may have been correct. Shortly thereafter reconciling, G-Unit continued to feud with The Game, who decided to respond to the beef during a Summer Jam performance. There, he encouraged fans to launch a boycott of G-Unit called G-U-Not. What fans did not know was that even as the two sides had jointly held a press conference calling for both sides to reconcile, both rappers would spend the next 2 years attacking one another over numerous diss tracks. After The Game's performance at Summer Jam, where he called G-Unit out, the rapper would respond to growing tensions with his recording titled 300 Bars and Run It. The recording, which was from the mixtape You Know What It Is Volume 3, was an extended track aimed at G-Unit as well as members of Roc-A-Fella Records. 50 Cent then responded via his Piggy Bank music video. In the visuals, The Game was depicted as a Mr. Potato Head doll. Both sides would continue to attack each other, whether it was over mixtapes of their own, as in the case of The Game's mixtapes Ghost Unit and Stop Snitchin', Stop Lying, or the work of other closely affiliated artists, as is the case of G-Unit's Records artist Spider Loc, who used his music to insult The Game. These encounters led to even more responses, such as The Game going at Spider Loc on the song 240 Bars, Spider Joke. By 2007, tensions brewed yet again, this time between The Game and Tony Yayo. Reports indicated that Tony Yayo and his friend Lodi Mack had encountered Czar Entertainment CEO Jimmy Henchman's, The Game's manager, 14-year-old son upon leaving a studio. Both Yayo and Mack proceeded to assault Henchman's son. The encounter would eventually lead to Mack's arrest and his sentencing to 2 years in prison. In the aftermath of the encounter, The Game responded with the recording Body Bags featured on his mixtapes, You Know What It Is Volume 4. G-Unit then hit The Game back with the recording We On Some Shit. In the song, G-Unit criticized Czar Entertainment as well as fellow rappers Cameron and Fat Joe. The feud did not end there. Reports indicated that in 2009, Jimmy Henchman had hired a hitman to kill Lodi Mack. It would take 8 years until Henchman was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 2 life sentences in prison. By June 2010, The Game began to publicly express that he would not object to joining the G-Unit in a reunion of sorts. Fans responded positively to this news, even going as far as to start a Facebook group intended to encourage the rappers to make a G-Unit comeback. By late 2016, reports seemed to indicate that the two sides had finally decided to end their long-standing beef. The road to reuniting G-Unit did not begin with the game, however. As early as 2014, the original members of G-Unit decided to reunite at that year's Summer Jam event. Even though Tony Yayo and 50 Cent had separately stated that G-Unit was no more as early as February of that year, members of G-Unit Records, including Young Buck, who had departed the group for a 6-year period, and Louisiana rapper Kid, were added to the group upon its reformation. The day immediately following Summer Jam, G-Unit would release Nah I'm Talking About, a remix of HS87's Grindin' My Whole Life. Many argue that the release of this song signaled their official comeback. In June 2014, G-Unit would go on to release a number of remixes to popular songs by other artists. These included songs by Drake and R&B stars like Trey Songz and Jeremiah. The group would even decide to release their own original song titled They Talked About Jesus. By June 2014, 50 Cent would make a public announcement that G-Unit was finally working on a studio album that the group was planning to release in late November of the same year. The same month, G-Unit shared with their fans that they would also be releasing a mixtape prior to the official release of their upcoming album. And at midnight on August 25, 2014, G-Unit surprised their fans and the public at large with the release of their EP titled The Beauty of Independence. The release of this EP marked their first collaborative project in 6 years. Immediately after the release of The Beauty of Independence, G-Unit decided to release music videos for Watch Me and Changes. While the group had promised an album later that year, they then decided to divide that music into 2 EP projects. The first had been The Beauty of Independence, and the second would be titled The Beast is G-Unit. Ultimately, the group decided to push that release back to a 2015 date, and instead, on November 10, 2014, G-Unit released a deluxe version of The Beauty of Independence. The new version included 2 new songs, Ease Up and Big Body Benz. This EP was later followed up with The Beast is G-Unit, which was finally released to the public on March 3, 2015. And yet, even as some members of the group had reunited, some continued to exchange hasty words. Reports indicated that in February of 2014, Tony Yayo was on record claiming that G-Unit had officially broken up. He and 50 Cent were no longer friends, and he had decided to officially retire from music. Yayo claimed that being involved in music and the industry at large had caused him too much stress. He stated that even though he was no longer a member of G-Unit, he felt happy with that decision because he had already accomplished everything that he had set out to do. 50 Cent, however, could not help but chime in. In a series of interviews in April of 2014, 50 Cent made a number of condescending comments about Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo. 50 Cent claimed that the group had broken up due to ongoing infighting. In addition to the well-known names of G-Unit, the group would eventually go on to add to their roster an individual by the name of Kid. Kid was initially discovered by rapper Lil Wayne while he was performing on a street corner in New Orleans. In the early days of his career, Kid decided to sign a recording contract with Wayne's record label imprint, Young Money Entertainment, where he joined as a member of the southern hip-hop group Squad Up. While the group would eventually disband and Kid would then decide to leave Young Money in 2004, by 2011, Kid was signed to yet another hip-hop giant, New York City-based rapper 50 Cent. Kid's relationship with 50 Cent started in part because of some trouble he had encountered only a month before officially signing with 50. In June 2011, only 2 weeks after meeting 50 Cent for the first time, Kid was shot 6 times. Reports suggest that in the aftermath of the shooting, 50 Cent expressed deep empathy with Kid's situation because it was very reminiscent of his own shooting in 2000. 50 Cent decided that instead of allowing the industry to do to Kid what had been done to him, that is Columbia Records walking away from 50 Cent at the time he needed the most, 50 Cent decided to stand by Kid. As a result of this relationship with 50 Cent, Kid would go on to appear on several of 50 Cent's projects, including The Big 10, released in 2011, The Lost Tape in 2012, and 5, Murder by Numbers, his 2012 project. 50 Cent would permanently add Kid to the G-Unit roster in June of 2014, after the rapper had been prominently featured on 50 Cent's 5th studio album, Animal Ambition. However, despite so much success alongside 50 Cent and his new G-Unit crew, Kid announced on April 11, 2018 that he had left G-Unit Records. The rapper cited wanting to focus on his own independent label, RLLNR Entertainment, for his departure. He also mentioned that it was very important to him to be his own boss, just as 50 Cent was. He told XXL magazine, "Fifth is all about that. He's all about you branding yourself. And you can't always expect the person that holds your hand to help you cross the street, you know? So right now, I'm just moving how I'm moving and trying to make it happen." Even though he publicly cited wanting to go the independent route, rumors swirled that something else was at play. According to XXL, many believed that there was beef or conflict at the center of his departure from G-Unit. But Kid quickly squashed those rumors, saying that his decision was really just an attempt to do what was right for his own career. He made sure to publicly articulate that he hoped fans would understand his decision. Once a person sees you moving on your own, they act like you can't boss up because 50's boss. I know I'm Kid, but I'm still a man. In addition to Kid, G-Unit also included other members such as Sean Money XL. Sean Money XL was a well-known DJ, songwriter, and record producer from New York who had worked closely with 50 Cent. Not too long after Interscope had decided to give 50 Cent his own G-Unit label in 2003, Sean Money XL quickly became president of G-Unit Records. In a 35-minute video 50 Cent released in 2015, he discussed why his friendship ended with Sean Money. In the video, 50 suggested that the beef between the former friends stemmed from financial disagreements and greed. 50 Cent claimed, "When the money came, when the check came, Shaw started going like everybody else. Just started reaching in my pockets, trying to get the money, as much money as they could get. He charged the most he's ever charged for a track for Bloodhound on Get Rich or Die Trying." I said, "Cool, just give him the money." Then he came back around and said, "How do you charge for studio time?" 50 Cent then added, "He asking for 50,000. I said, "Cool." Then I thought about it and said, "If I give him 50,000, that's it, because he's been paid for all of his services, everything." I said, "Nah, don't take 50,000. Take 30,000 and a point. 30,000 and a point on the sales on my record." That 1 point was worth 1.3 million because we sold 13 million records on that first album. So I gave him 1.33 million instead of 50,000. And then after the record took off and sold so many copies, Jimmy and them came around, but Shaw didn't take no risk. He took all of his money off the table. And then Jimmy Iovine came around and G-Unit Records was ready. So they cut the check for G-Unit Records. They gave me 15 million. When I get to 15 million, I see them round again, looking like they ready to start reaching into my pockets. So I told them, "You ain't getting none of that money because you took your equity out of the situation immediately. You were paid for everything you've done." Despite their beef, Sean Money XL claimed he was not intimidated by 50 Cent's totalitarian tactics. He immediately took shots back at 50 Cent on the Twitter platform. He stated, "Don't believe the hype. Why are we talking about me instead of good music? Where are the hits at? I've been consistent since I left. You help somebody who was helpless, and he takes a dump on you every chance he gets. Let me tell my side now. Walmart ass nigga, you get what you pay for. A cheap person will do cheap things. Who wants to be partners with him? They all fall out eventually. So let's talk facts, not lies. You destroyed what was built, and you will continue to do that. I feel sorry for you, bro." One of the most surprising exits from G-Unit was the departure of Lloyd Banks. Lloyd Banks had long worked alongside his childhood friends 50 Cent and Tony Yayo and had had great success as a member of G-Unit. However, by June 2018, Banks took to Instagram to announce that he was leaving G-Unit Records. While many believed that Banks and 50 Cent were still friends, 50 Cent would eventually admit that the two had stopped speaking. And yet, 4 months after disclosing his feud with his former childhood friend and longtime fellow G-Unit member, 50 posted a photo with the caption, "Check out my boy Lloyd Banks, new mixtape coming soon, Independence Day. He's doing his own thing, and you know it's going to be loaded with bars." This puzzled fans as they thought the two were not friends. And even in the midst of this social media post, rumors continued to swirl that their relationship was no longer amicable. In an interview with Big Boy, 50 Cent disclosed that Banks, I don't even know. He couldn't even tell you like at any point when you speak to him where the problem is. I put him like where I put my son Marquise. Like they just have something internal going on with them that gives them some sort of resentment towards me. And I just don't even care about what's going on. Trav, a former associate of G-Unit, also then took to Instagram Live to give greater context on the matter. Trav stated, "Banks' father died, bro. And Banks was sad, bro. All Banks wanted to do was him to pull up like, yo, bro, I'm sorry. Your condolences." Because a nigga 50 don't come from no family. He tried to play like this fake role like, man, you ain't even know your father. The news of their feud being connected to the news of Banks' father's death seemed to have weight to it. In a 2014 interview with MTV, 50 Cent explained that he initially started drifting away from his childhood friend after his father died, and he started to become what 50 Cent suggests was musically uninspired. 50 stated, "Alright, he passed away, but you can't just go home and stay home." Even though there were other members of G-Unit who spoke about the ongoing situation between 50 Cent and Banks, Lloyd himself did not speak on the matter. Instead, he uttered words on several recordings that appeared to be aimed at his former friend, 50 Cent. After his departure, and in the midst of his silence, Banks would go on to release a clothing line and continue to tour, though he did not release new projects, other than a few freestyles here and there. This would eventually change in 2021 when Banks took to Instagram to tease fans about a possible new music release. As part of this surprise, he released a video with a brief spoken word monologue from poet Rashawn Brown, as well as a tracklist and cover art for what would be a June 4th, 2021 release, his first album in 11 years following his 2010 album Hunger for More 2. The album, titled The Course of the Inevitable, or COTI for short, would receive fairly positive reviews and go on to sell 12,000 copies in its first week. In addition to being excited about Banks' release, many loyal G-Unit fans would also be curious about whether the 18-track project contained references to the ongoing beef between Banks and his former G-Unit boss 50 Cent. Many fans suspected that Banks meant to address 50 Cent in the album's song Stranger Things, where the rapper says, "When you're effed up, behavior turns irregular quick. Sometimes the pressure overwhelms when you're the head of the clique. But don't get ahead of yourself, I ain't bending for shit. Nobody sees your vision until you're successful. Your favorite's nowhere near me when I'm dedicated. Always humble, usually disciplined, and never hated. Call me quiet, call me lazy, talent never faded. It's frustrating when your grinding ain't appreciated. Should have been dead in my 20s, shoot, at least I made it. Guess I gotta prove myself again, increase your payment." Many fans claim that this lyric was in response to a claim that 50 Cent made in his book Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, where he called him lazy. In addition to Lloyd Banks leaving, G-Unit also had to worry about Tony Yayo's constant legal issues. Tony Yayo, a stage name that referenced the colloquial word used for cocaine, and the main character from the 1983 film Scarface, first encountered legal trouble in 2002 when he was arrested for weapons possession. According to reports, Yayo was caught with a Glock 20 handgun and a Colt AR-15 in the trunk of his car. When police stopped him, they discovered that he's also had an outstanding warrant for a previous charge. Yayo was immediately arrested and sentenced for bail jumping. He would go on to spend a year of his life in prison at Lakeview Incarceration Correctional Facility as a result. By January 8, 2004, Tony Yayo was out on parole. However, the very next day, he was arrested yet again this time. Tony Yayo was charged with possessing a forged passport. The G-Unit rapper would go on to serve time in federal prison for a little over a month. It was at this time and that his record label imprint G-Unit and Detroit rapper Eminem would begin a public campaign which they called Free Yayo. While this campaign was going on outside of the doors and bars of his prison, Yayo was not aware of how much attention Free Yayo was really getting. The scope of the attention became immediately clear to him once he saw Eminem wearing a Free Yayo t-shirt on stage at the 2003 Grammy Awards. Once he was eventually released, Tony Yayo would jump right back into his musical career and release Ain't No Click as part of Lloyd Banks' debut album, The Hunger for More. By March of 2007, Tony Yayo was in hot water yet again. This time, the G-Unit rapper was arrested for allegedly assaulting Jimmy Henchman's 14-year-old son. Reports suggested that he, 50 Cent, and members of their entourage approached the child and pushed him against a nearby wall. Tony Yayo then allegedly hit the teenager several times and said F Czar Entertainment. Despite reports, Tony Yayo pleaded not guilty, and 50 Cent later proved his innocence by using video footage from his Connecticut mansion where he claimed he had been at the time of the alleged incident. That same year, the violence would be turned on to Yayo's family. According to reports, on April 18, 2007, Yayo's mother's home was sprayed with bullets. Many argue that the violent attack was connected to Tony Yayo's house arrest. Less than 3 months later, Tony Yayo was once again in a courtroom where the judge heard details of his alleged assault. At the end of the ordeal, the prosecution offered Tony Yayo a 9-month prison sentence in exchange for pleading guilty. Despite the offer, the G-Unit rapper rejected the proposal to plead guilty. And by February of 2008, the situation finally came to an end once prosecutors decided to drop the charges. Despite all the internal feuds and subsequent legal issues had by various members of the group, one of its members, the star, 50 Cent, had tremendous success following the death of G-Unit Records. 11 years after G-Unit's debut album release, the American crime drama TV series Power first debuted on the Starz network on June 7, 2014. Created and produced in collaboration with Courtney A. Kemp, Power told the story of James St. Patrick, played by actor Amari Hardwick, a witty and yet ruthless drug dealer who goes by the alias of Ghost. Fans were enamored with St. Patrick's character, who comes to power while moving through the ranks of the drug underworld, but who ultimately wishes to leave the criminal world to pursue legitimate business as a nightclub owner. In the midst of his efforts, fans watched as Ghost brought catastrophe to his life, whether it was in his attempt to avoid police capture, having an extramarital affair, or managing what was often turbulent and shifting economic and political alliances. With the release of the hit TV series Power, 50 Cent was quickly becoming a television mogul. Along with his growing fan base, the television show had positive reviews for its pacing, its story, and even its acting, which also featured 50 Cent himself. The show quickly became one of Starz Network's most highly rated series and one of cable television's most watched shows until the show came to an end on February 9, 2020. In the midst of Power's success, 50 Cent was on record stating that he would like to forget about his past with G-Unit. In an interview with DJ Who Kid for his Who Army Live YouTube show, DJ Who Kid asked whether 50 Cent wanted to translate the story of G-Unit to film, to which 50 Cent responded, "I don't care to do that. I'd like to forget G-Unit." At the height of his Power fame, it appeared that the tension between G-Unit members was filled with nothing but disdain. With the release of his book Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, 50 Cent was on record asserting that Banks and Yayo had failed to adapt to the changing music landscape. With that being said, whether or not there will ever be any more G-Unit albums, that's probably out of the way. The legacy has already been laid down though, even if the label hasn't updated its catalog of music in many years. Before Murder Inc. was a successful gold mine of a record label, its co-founder Irv Gotti would come to prominence in the streets of New York City as DJ Irv. In his capacity as a DJ, Irv Gotti would work with fellow Queens native rapper Mike Geronimo, who he initially met at a Queens high school talent show, on his 1995 debut album The Natural, and a very young Ja Rule during his time with Cash Money Click beginning in 1994. Gotti would also go on to develop relationships with both Jay-Z and DMX during his time working with Def Jam Records. In fact, Ja Rule appeared on Mike Geronimo's DJ Irv produced track Time to Build in 1995, featuring both DMX and Jay-Z prior to their mainstream fame. After Irv Gotti spent some time working with Russell Simmons to help rebuild the success of Def Jam, Simmons decided to give Gotti his own label under the banner of Def Jam. While watching the television series Biography on A&E during their Gangsta Week programming, Gotti noticed a Murder Inc. logo pop up on the screen. Gotti knew that he wanted to make his name by putting out hit records, or as he put it, murder hits. When deciding what to name his label, he believed that the best name to convey his music industry dreams would be Murder Inc. By 1998, Irv Gotti would establish Murder Inc. alongside his brother Chris. The label's initial roster would include Queens rappers Ja Rule and Black Child, who both joined in 97, Nemesis, who would join a year later in 98, R&B vocalist Christina Milian, and rappers Cadillac Ta and Vita, who would each join in 1999. But what led to the rise and fall of Murder Inc., a label that would be dominant in the rap, R&B, and pop airwaves in the first decade of the 2000s, and what would be their approach to their business? Was it the way they conducted it? Was it their ongoing beef with other prominent members of hip-hop? Or their encounters with the Internal Revenue Service, also known as the IRS, that would lead to their eventual collapse as a label and their downfall? Gotti's label Murder Inc. officially came onto the scene in 1999 with the release of Ja Rule's album Veni Vedi Vici, which featured the hit single Holla Holla. Soon after, the album went platinum in the US, catapulting Ja Rule and the Murder Inc. label into an entirely new level of fame. A year later, the label continued to expand, first with its new association with the vocalist and rapper Lil Mo, who would go on to record 2 duets that year with Ja Rule, then with the release of Murder Inc.'s first compilation record, Irv Gotti Presents The Murderers, and then with the signing of both rapper Charlie Baltimore, who would first leave the label in 2004, then return for 2 years in 2008, and R&B vocalist Ashanti, who would remain with the label until her departure in 2008. No sooner did Murder Inc. sign Lil Mo than their friendship with the artist began to sour. The minor label beef intensified once Lil Mo discovered that the track she had recorded for Ja Rule's third studio album had either been cut or replaced with the contributions of other female artists. These decisions at Murder Inc. would eventually lead to Lil Mo deciding to cut ties with the label just as they were entering their mainstream music peak. Between mid-2001 and early 2003, Murder Inc. would reach its peak of success and mainstream visibility with the release of Ja Rule's multi-platinum selling album Pain Is Love and Ashanti's multi-platinum and self-titled debut album, which spawned 3 hit singles on the Billboard charts. In that same year, Charlie Baltimore achieved 2 hit singles alongside Ashanti and Ja Rule. Vocalist Lloyd signed with the label, and Irv Gotti decided to begin business talks with Nas and Bobby Brown, who would eventually be signed to Murder Inc. In 2007, Murder Inc. would even go as far as to sign singer-songwriter Vanessa Carlton, an unconventional signing for a hip-hop label. Before 50 Cent came to mainstream fame with his debut album Get Rich or Die Tryin', as an up-and-coming rapper, 50 Cent used interesting tactics to garner public attention, one of which was his notorious 1999 recording How to Rob, where he called out rap music heavyweights like Jay-Z, Mace, DMX, and Big Pun by name. While the streets were buzzing with interest in 50 Cent, he had not yet achieved the success or visibility that Ja Rule had with his contemporary debut album Veni Vedi Vici, though the two would eventually bump heads, a conflict that would result in 50 Cent waging war on Ja Rule and the staff and crew of his label Murder Inc. To date, this beef is one of hip-hop's longest and most heated conflicts that still kind of goes on. In 1999, there were reports that Ja Rule had been robbed at gunpoint in Southside Jamaica, Queens for his chain. Weeks later, claims emerged that Ja Rule had witnessed 50 Cent spending time with the culprit of Ja Rule's robbing in a club. While that moment would be a spark that lit the flame of the conflict between the rappers, Ja Rule later confirmed that he had not seen 50 Cent with the man in question. Instead, Ja Rule claimed that 50 Cent's real anger toward him stemmed from being snubbed by Murder Inc. during a video shoot for Ja Rule's single Murder for Life featuring Memphis Bleek. In October of the same year, 50 Cent released his record Life's on the Line, which most fans agreed was a deliberate diss record directed towards Murder Inc. and Ja Rule, even though the record does explicitly name Ja Rule. Fans made that assessment based on the fact that 50 Cent directly mocked Murder Inc.'s signature Murda chant throughout the recording. The single would go on to peak at number 37 on the Billboard Hot Rap Singles chart and garner some street attention. Immediately after 50 Cent released the single, he and Ja Rule encountered one another at an Atlanta nightclub, where the two were booked to perform. There, the two rappers got into a heated exchange which quickly escalated into a physical altercation, and the two rappers' necklaces breaking. A member of 50 Cent's team quickly recovered Ja Rule's chain, and 50 Cent's team then brokered a deal with Ja Rule to get his chain back. The deal included receiving a Movado watch in exchange for Ja's chain, a claim that Ja Rule denies. By 2000, both Murder Inc. and G-Unit, the crew that was associated with 50 Cent, would encounter one another at the Hit Factory studios in New York City after Ja Rule received word that 50 Cent was there recording. Ja Rule decided to show up and pay 50 Cent and his crew a visit, which later led to a physical altercation. From this encounter, 50 Cent was stabbed, and Ja Rule and Black Child were both arrested. Black Child would later take credit for stabbing 50 Cent. 2 years later, 50 Cent would release his 5th mixtape, No Mercy, No Fear, after inking a $1 million deal with Shady Aftermath Records. One of the more popular recordings from his August 2002 release was Wanksta, where 50 Cent takes shots at a figure inspired by Ja Rule. The single would become 50 Cent's first hit, peaking at the 13th position on the Billboard Hot 100. Shortly thereafter, in November, Irv Gotti told the Star and Buck Wild morning show that 50 Cent had signed an order of protection against him and Ja Rule. Fans claimed that Gotti's disclosure of this information was intended to paint 50 Cent as an informant and question his street credibility. In response, 50 Cent denied the allegations, though it has since been confirmed that the order of protection does exist and that the NYPD issued it on behalf of 50 Cent as a mere formality. After Gotti criticized 50 Cent for being a snitch, 50 Cent quickly responded in the form of a mixtape titled G-Unit, The Future Is Now. The mixtape contained a number of recordings and interludes attacking Murder Inc. One even went as far as to satirize Ja Rule's singing. In January 2003, the offices of Violator Records and Violator Management, the team that handled 50 Cent's career, were attacked by an unknown gunman who opened fire. Thankfully, no employees or artists were injured in the attacks. That said, there were also no arrests made either, even as early reports of the incident did tie the incident to the ongoing conflict between 50 Cent and Ja Rule. Onlookers estimated that this shooting incident was evidence that the conflict between the two rappers had escalated, and there was likely no going back. Across 2003, 50 Cent and Ja Rule continued to take shots at one another on record. In February, 50 Cent released his debut album, Get Rich or Die Tryin', which charted at the #1 spot on the Billboard 200. On the album's Dr. Dre produced track Back Down, which was ultimately not released as a single, 50 Cent questioned Ja Rule and Murder Inc.'s authenticity and street credibility. By April, Ja Rule fired back in his diss track, Loose Change. On the recording, he took aim at 50 Cent and G-Unit, Eminem and his daughter Haley, Dr. Dre, Busta Rhymes, and even Chris Lighty, who was 50 Cent's manager. 1 week later, 50 Cent, Eminem, and Busta Rhymes responded in a recording titled Hail Mary, which critiqued Ja Rule's character and his infatuation with Tupac Shakur. Ja Rule then responded with his jab, Guess Who Shot Ya?, in which he rapped over a classic Biggie instrumental. He then expanded his discussion to 50 Cent and G-Unit on his 5th album, Blood in My Eye, which was released in November 2003. Many agree that the album represented Ja Rule's first quantifiable loss in the battle due to the fact that it did not have the same success as his earlier multi-platinum releases. After 2003, while the beef between 50 Cent, Ja Rule, and Murder Inc. quelled in terms of its public visibility, there were several notable moments across the years where the rappers continued to throw jabs at one another. In 2007, during a Hot 97 interview hosted by Angie Martinez, Ja Rule accused 50 Cent of reproducing his sound after 50 Cent signed his large record deal with Shady Aftermath. 5 years later, after Ja Rule pled guilty to federal tax evasion, 50 Cent used this moment to criticize the rapper on the social media platform Twitter. When Ja Rule met with Angie Martinez yet again in 2013, he admitted that, in his opinion, Murder Inc. had lost the feud. Among the cited reasons for the loss was the federal investigation into the label Murder Inc. In addition, due to 50 Cent's rising popularity, much of the public appeared to have taken 50 Cent's side over Ja Rule's. Years later, the feud was lit up again during a performance for the Versus platform. After witnessing a series of messages on Instagram, G.O.D began responding to fans who mentioned his name and the beef with 50 Cent. Gotti was on record writing, "All y'all talking that 50 stuff, all good. He got beat up, stabbed up, shot up, and sued us. That's all I'm gonna say. Your hero ain't what you think he is, period, and facts." 50 Cent would eventually respond to the situation by stating, "What the hell am I trending for? I said I ain't doing whatever that stuff is they doing. I put their whole label out of business. F with me if you want to. I would stay out of my way if I wasn't me. LOL." The comments also led to Ja Rule publicly responding as well by calling into the Big Tigger morning show. Irv told Big Tigger, "You know, the Fed's tactics. That's what they do. They treated us like a criminal mob organization. And when they do that, what they do is they suck all your resources. They shut you down financially. They take down your bank accounts. They take all your assets. They seize everything so that you can't fight. So how you think I'm fighting a rap battle? I'm fighting a real fight. And then on top of it all, come on, man. I'm battling 17 rappers. It ain't like I was just battling 50 Cent. He likes to throw his hat on like he was the guy. Man, stop. Eminem made you, created you. You're nothing with that effing white boy. Stop it." In 2003, reports indicated that the federal government had raided the offices of Murder Inc., the Def Jam subsidiary. The raid began with a 2-year-long case against Chris and Irv Gotti, who were required by law to prove that Murder Inc. had not functioned as a money laundering operation for Kenneth Supreme McGriff of Queen's legendary Supreme team. Despite their multi-platinum success, Murder Inc. was still questioned about its affiliation with McGriff after Gotti decided to fund a movie titled Crime Partners that he directed. In the aftermath of the raid, life at the Murder Inc. offices changed tremendously. By that time, Gotti had spent upwards of $10 million in legal fees fighting the case, and over the course of the entire trial, the label had no distribution. On December 2nd, 2005, the jury overseeing the details of the case decided to acquit the Gottis of all charges. They beat a federal case. Following the trial, Murder Inc. decided to drop the moniker of murder in an effort to transform their public reputation. On December 4, 2003, Irv Gotti decided to hold a press conference at the Riga Royal Hotel in Manhattan, alongside Russell Simmons and Dr. Benjamin Chavis regarding recent changes with his label Murder Inc. and to discuss the ongoing feuds and the IRS investigation. During this press conference, Irv Gotti announced that Murder Inc. would be changing the name of their label to The Inc. Gotti claimed that the name change was meant to shed any negativity that was associated with their label. It was at the same press conference that Gotti stated that he had initially intended to name Murder Inc. Lockdown Records. He maintained that his current decision to rename his label Murder Inc. came after speaking with Minister Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam and Russell Simmons. Gotti recalled, "I'm like, damn, we just made a classic record, and they just want to focus on that word murder. We want to be good people. You got to do what's in your heart, and you got to do what's right." And yet, despite changing the label name, Gotti stated that he would not be changing his own professional name to drop the Gotti from his entertainment persona because Jay-Z had been the one to bestow that name upon him. During the question and answer segment of the press conference, a reporter asked Irv Gotti about his opinion on Eminem and a series of tapes that had recently emerged that were created approximately 10 years ago at that point, where the rapper was using racial epitaphs to describe black people. In his response, Gotti stated, "I'm a defender of black women. You can listen to our records. Everything that we do is about a man and woman riding for each other. So I can't give him no pass. Those words, his apology, are far worse than the tape. I ain't riding with that. People know that we got problems with them. Where is C. Dolores Tucker? Where is Dionne Warwick? It makes me question my faith in my people." Simmons, on the other hand, stated that he accepted Eminem's public apology for the use of those words, and this decision to accept Eminem's apology ultimately put Simmons at odds with the Source magazine and prompted its co-owner Dave Mays to resign from the board of Simmons' Hip Hop Summit Action Network. By the end of 2004, Murder Inc., now known as The Inc., was ordered to leave the Def Jam offices while the IRS investigations were ongoing. Once trials began in early 2005, Def Jam had decided to make The Inc. honor their contracts and release compilation albums. However, for much of 2005 and part of 2006, The Inc. spent much of their time searching for distribution given that they were not re-signed by Def Jam. The Inc. first approached Lior Cohen at Warner, who offered them a deal which involved Warner buying The Inc. That also included making Gotti the head of The Inc. as well as Atlantic. Despite the deal, Gotti was worried that he would not be paid enough in this role, and he and the members of The Inc. ultimately decided to end talks with Warner. Gotti then entered into talks with Capitol and Interscope. While it appeared that The Inc. was about to sign with Atlantic, Universal Records decided to offer Gotti a 7-year deal, which was in part financed by a national talent agency out of Southern California, 50% ownership of The Inc.'s materials, and a job as A&R with a higher paying role. By early 2006, The Inc. decided to sign to Universal and soon began signing artists and releasing music, including the work of Vanessa Carlton. By 2009, Irv Gotti would first announce that he would be releasing Ashanti from her contract, and a month later, Lloyd would ask to be released from his contract as well. That same year, fellow Murder Inc. artist Ja Rule would also announce that he was no longer signed to the label and would be going independent through his own label, Empire, which was distributed through Fontana. A year later, Charlie Baltimore would also decide to leave Murder Inc. in search of new opportunities. When it's all said and done, Murder Inc. Records was a hit factory that was unfortunately interrupted by many of the outside street beef as well as legal elements that surrounded its members, making it hard for the label to just strictly stick to music. But with all the gold, platinum, and multi-platinum plaques that once decorated their walls, it's safe to say that Murder Inc.'s music helped define the sound coming out of clubs and cars all across the United States through the late 90s to the mid-2000s. And now we may see some resurfacing of Murder Inc. because Irv Gotti had just been celebrating recently about signing a multiple 9-figure deal where he would get about half of the money, and then half of the money they were going to invest in him for future projects, whether it be film or music related. If the Los Angeles-based rap music label Priority Records isn't really at the top of your need to know in the hip-hop world, you're definitely far more familiar with the legend that it's been associated with, whether that be Jay-Z, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, NWA, Ice Cube, Ice-T, Ghetto Boys, Cypress Hill, Mos Def, Master P, and Big L have all had albums come out under the Priority Records banner. In fact, the company has also served as a distributor for labels from all over the United States rap music landscape, like Suge Knight's Death Row Records and Eazy-E's Ruthless Records on the West Coast, Jay-Z's Roc-A-Fella Records and RZA's Wu-Tang Records on the East Coast, and Jay Prince's Rap-A-Lot Records and Master P's No Limit Records down in the South. Before we can fully understand what the eventual death of Priority Records meant to the industry when it ceased to be a major player in the marketplace, we first have to take a look at how this music empire expanded to such a massive reach. With an extensive track record that's heavily influential in putting the gangsta rap subgenre on the map, you might assume that the label was started somewhere in South Central LA by authentic street dudes that survived the environment and built up their business from whatever other means it may be. But the origin of Priority Records is quite the opposite. It was founded in 1985 by Brian Turner, Mark Cerami, and Steve Drath. Three white guys who were not from gang territories or even from America, but in Canada actually, and from within the music industry. They were all former music executives from a Canadian company called G.O.O.D Records. In fact, Brian Turner is from Winnipeg, Canada, and established Priority Records with financial assistance from a since-defunct Winnipeg company called Artec that was run by two former G.O.O.D board members, Harold Kives, Brian Turner's father, and Ray Kives, Brian Turner's uncle. This initial investment in Priority Records from Artec's Harold and Ray Kives gave these two older family members of Brian Turner a 50% ownership in Priority right off the bat. But just 2 years after Priority Records opened its doors in 1985, Priority was able to buy back that 50% half in 1987 to retain full ownership. But in the early days of Priority Records, they had to work their way up to signing rappers to record deals. And they initially just licensed pre-existing rap songs to be released in a compilation album format, such as Greatest Hits of the Street, Rappin' and Scratchin' in 1987. The 8-song track listing consisted of Jam on It by Nucleus, The Message by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Peter Gunn by Art of Noise, White Horse by Laid Back, Roaches by Bobby, Jimmy and the Critters, Rockbox by Run DMC, Jailhouse Rap by Fat Boys, White Lines by Grandmaster Flash. Priority Records also dropped another compilation with several big names of the 1980s hip-hop called Rap's Greatest Hits Volume 2, with many songs such as Make the Music With Your Mouth by Biz Markie. They had Eric B. and Rakim, Run DMC, Curtis Blow, Houdini, LA Dream Team, and several others. Gaining the rights to resell other people's music from bigger labels isn't exactly a business plan that would keep the lights on over at Priority Records for very long. Before they dove into discovering their own roster of rugged West Coast rappers, they sold music that actually had zero to do with hip-hop. A group of family-friendly, purple animated dried grapes known in the 1980s pop culture as the California Raisins. Using the stop-motion animation style called claymation, this fictional R&B group was brought to life out of pieces of clay shaped and filmed to move to the beat of old-school soul sounds. It's like their biggest hit, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, originally a Marvin Gaye Motown song from 1966. Once it was remade by the California Raisins in 1987, it managed to peak at number 84 on the Hot 100 chart and be seen all over the country in humorous TV commercials. Before you assume that this must have been some goofy gimmick that ruined Priority Records' reputation, it actually helped to build the company's foundation. The California Raisins became a multi-million-dollar merchandising craze that sold tons of fluffy toys, figurines, children's lunchboxes, comic books, and cartoons. Even music superstars like Michael Jackson and Ray Charles had their own California Raisin characters added to the television commercials. This all started in the late 1980s with the California Raisin Advisory Board teaming up with an advertising agency to promote the sale of raisins. But just how much did Priority Records benefit from the mainstream multimedia mania of the California Raisins? Between 1987 and 1988, the kid-friendly band released 4 albums on Priority, 2 of which went platinum. More than 2 million people bought these albums that included old songs like Lean On Me and You Can't Hurry Love. It was also estimated that the overall sale of raisins jumped up by 20% after the very first commercial aired. Priority's co-founder Mark Cerami knew that in order for the label to grow beyond a home for novelty acts, they needed to showcase their own artists. With all that success from the pop culture sensation of the California Raisins, a solid track record for sales, and a bunch of money, Priority Records was ready, willing, and able to start signing artists to recording contracts. Priority decided to sign Compton, California rappers Eazy-E and NWA, along with giving Eazy-E's Ruthless Records national distribution and the music industry strength that it needed to be competitive. Mark Cerami has said, "After the launch of NWA, I was pretty confident we could build the largest record label in the world." The first albums released under this agreement went on to become 2 of the biggest California rap albums of the 80s. the triple platinum selling Straight Outta Compton by NWA in August 88, and in the following month, the double platinum selling Easy Does It by Eazy-E in September of 88. Brian Turner has described the decision to do business with Ruthless Records by describing his meeting with Eazy-E's much older Jewish business partner, Jerry Heller. Jerry had an office in the same building that we were in at Priority, 6430 Sunset Boulevard, which is now the CNN building. We had met before. I think it was either through Irving or someone else. We didn't really have a relationship, but we were friendly enough. There was a restaurant downstairs in the building called the Jolly Roger, so I'd see him quite often there. One day, Jerry said, "Hey, I have a tape of a group I want you to listen to." He started talking about the group, and I said, "Give me the cassette." I listened, and it shocked me as much as I saw ultimately and historically how it shocked everybody else. It was something unique that I'd never heard before in my life. Jerry called me up after and said, "You really have to see them live." That's the one part of the movie Straight Outta Compton they got right. I went down to Skateland and saw them perform. I didn't talk to them that night at all. I just kind of slipped in, saw them perform, and left. The Boys in the Hood 12-inch had just come out. It wasn't readily available, and it certainly wasn't being played on the radio. Yet the 300 kids in that club knew every single lyric. It wasn't pick up your iPhone and punch in the song, or even listening to the radio, or going to a store to buy it. It wasn't available. But the kids sought it out. Honestly, I wish I could take the credit for having seen the vision that Jerry saw, but we later made a pretty quick deal. It wasn't complicated because, lucky me, nobody else was interested in the group. So it was a pretty easy, quick deal. That was how my relationship with Jerry began. The one thing for sure, and nobody can take this away from Jerry, is that he saw Eazy and NWA before anybody. That will forever be his legacy. Priority Records built its rep as a sturdy, independent label for hardcore rap acts that were fewer pop-friendly by not even worrying about mainstream radio play, which was the fast-track route to hit records in the 80s and 90s. Instead, Priority focused on ear-to-the-street, underground promotion, and still managed to sell millions of units without having to clash with the big league labels over radio rotation slots. Priority's marketing squad was developed by Vice President Alyssa Pisano, who was in charge of Priority's marketing and creative services department during the bulk of their glory days between 87 and 96. What was it like bringing all the street knowledge of NWA into the Priority building? Looking back on the impact of Priority, Turner says, "I'm so grateful for being born and raised in Winnipeg, and I took all those values with me. I think that's one of the things that endeared me to all these rappers. To them, I almost had a sort of sweet innocence. I do what I say I'm going to do, and because of that, I was a hero in the rap business. That's why I survived for 20 years. I had this light bulb moment in a bar. Every time they played a beat record, not even music, just a beatbox, and rapping, the dance floor would be packed. Disco didn't do anything. I was looking at that going, there's definitely something going on, appealing to this generation. Something clearly parents wouldn't understand or really like. Their own music, not rock and roll. I already had the relationships with the record companies. This put us on the map. I had a lot of people coming to me with cassettes, and NWA was one of them. I knew there was something there, but there's no way anyone could predict what happened. I couldn't relate to it. Being from Winnipeg, how could I possibly? It was frightening to me. I knew it would scare the shit out of a lot of people. NWA's lyrics never shied away from the use of profanity, depictions of overcoming poverty, sexual desires, conflicts with police. Decades before the death of young black at the hands of law enforcement would become a painfully common occurrence in the media. But back in 1988, when NWA released one of the most controversial songs of that area, bluntly titled F the Police, it led to Priority Records receiving a letter from the FBI on August 1st, 1989, accusing NWA of encouraging violence and disrespect for law enforcement officers with its F the Police song. Instead of complying with the pressure that was coming their way, Priority Records, Ruthless Records, Eazy-E, and NWA all embraced the right to express themselves. Famed rapper Talib Kweli, who, when signed to Rawkus Records, had much distributed by Priority Records, stated to Rock the Bells that Priority Records became a way for West Coast street music and gangsta music to have a great platform and make it all the way to places like New York, where I could appreciate it. Dr. Dre describes NWA as Public Enemy, but for the streets. The production style, the energy of it. It has the same honesty and truth as Public Enemy, but from a gangster street perspective. Hip-hop needed that. When the SoundScan music sales monitoring system was put into effect in 1991, positioning on Billboard charts was now actually being determined by record sales, isn't from reports received from DJs and record store owners. On June 22, 1991, made NWA's Niggas for Life backwards album, the first without Ice Cube as a member, became the first #1 album on the Billboard 200 chart with the calculations of SoundScan. The co-founder of Priority Records, Brian Turner, gets a few minutes of screen time in the 2015 blockbuster NWA biofilm Straight Outta Compton, played by actor Tate Ellington in the scene when Ice Cube's character barges into Priority Records with a baseball bat to address issues with his record contract. Turner remembers what it was like running into Ice Cube at the movie premiere of Straight Outta Compton. Cube grabbed me at the premiere, and he hugged me. He said, "If not for you, I'm not standing here. And there's no Snoop. And there's no Eminem." That was chilling to me. But after Ice Cube started feeling cheated by the Ruthless Records label that Priority was distributing, Cube decided to go solo, and it was Brian Turner who was the guy who signed him after the split. In fact, it was also Brian Turner who went back and forth between Louisiana and Suge Knight's California prison cell to get Snoop Dogg out of his deal with Death Row Records. And Turner also signed Ice-T after Warner Music distanced itself from the rapper over the controversy that arose from his song Cop Killer. Priority Records was a distributor for the mighty Death Row record label, co-founded by super producer Dr. Dre and the infamous mogul Suge Knight, music executive Dick Griffey, and rapper the DOC. Death Row made stars out of Dr. Dre when he went solo: Snoop Dogg, Tupac, Nate Dogg, The Dogg Pound, and Lady of Rage, among others. Think of Death Row as NWA as a record label that at its peak was bringing in over $100 million annually. Priority Records welcomed the Ghetto Boys and Rap-A-Lot Records in 1991 after Geffen Records dropped the group in 1990 after deeming their content too intense with graphic depictions of violence and sexual situations. Ghetto Boys released their group's best-selling album, We Can't Be Stopped, selling over 1 million copies and having the smash single Mind Playing Tricks on Me. The politically charged content continued in 1992 when Priority Records signed San Francisco rapper Pears, who was dropped by Tommy Boy Records and Time Warner due to his song Bush Killer, referring to then-President George H.W. Bush. Priority Records also signed Ice-T, a major pioneer of gangsta rap, before becoming a bankable big-name actor thanks to his role in 1991's New Jack City. Along with being a kingpin of West Coast street rap, Ice-T also fronted a rock band that didn't hold back either called Body Count. So much so that the group's 1992 song Cop Killer was labeled obscene by the U.S. Vice President Dan Quayle. Body Count even had its self-titled LP removed from over 1,000 record stores because of its content. And in January of 1993, Ice-T and Body Count released from their contracts with Sire Warner Bros., which is where Priority Records entered the picture. Ice-T's first album with Priority was 1993's Home Invasion, as Priority Records became a destination where artists that were perceived as too controversial from the mainstream could express themselves and actually have the company back them up when the going got rough. Priority Records also empowered its employees. In 1995, Dave Weiner, a Priority Records employee who got his start in their mailroom in 1991, approached co-founder Mark Cerami with a brilliant idea. Why not distribute other rap labels that were emerging from coast to coast, just as they had done with Ruthless Records? Mark Cerami agreed with Dave Weiner's plan, and Priority set a precedent in the music industry and a profitable business model that many companies like Def Jam would also do. Ironically, when Roc-A-Fella Records moved over from Priority to Def Jam, for example, Priority got to enjoy some of the success that Master P's No Limit Records sold over 14 million albums, grossing more than $140 million between 1997 and 1999 alone. In fact, No Limit became Priority Records' most successful distributed label. Priority was also home to the New York City-based indie hip-hop label Rawkus Records, which distributed Mos Def's Black on Both Sides and Pharoah Monk's Internal Affairs albums in 1999. Then in 2000 came Train of Thought, the debut album from Reflection Eternal that was made up of the duo Talib Kweli and High Tech. Priority Records may no longer be the epicenter of West Coast rap music and a profitable hub for independent record label distribution, but that doesn't change its massive catalog of over 110 gold and platinum certifications that it achieved while it was here. Ultimately, Priority was eventually sold to the distributor Capital EMI in 1999, was laying in limbo during 2004 and 2005, and tried to be revived on multiple occasions to no avail. But between 1985 and 2003, Priority Records had everything going for it, from dancing cartoon raisins to Dr. Dre to Jay-Z, and being a hub for what we're kind of witnessing right now with people being canceled. And they were the one record label that was saying, hey, if you're independent and got your own label and you're coming up, we'll distribute for you. And if you want a voice here, we can also sign you. And we're going to back you and make sure that you're distributed because we believe you have a right to expressing yourself in your music. Before Sean Carter, now known to everybody as Jay-Z, became a billionaire, husband to Beyonce, married, he was a rapper looking for a record deal, like most of his peers in the 90s. Dame Dash put up money for him to record a bunch of songs, and when a record deal was not forthcoming, began pressing the discs himself and selling them out of his car, and Roc-A-Fella Records was born. To try to get on the radio, Dame Dash shot a video for Jay-Z's song In My Lifetime for $16,000. On 16mm film, borrowed a friend's boat in St. Thomas to film a scene of what looked like playboys living the high life. After appearing on records with his hometown Brooklyn predecessors G.O.O.D and Big Daddy Kane, and releasing his debut solo single In My Lifetime, it was showtime for Jay-Z. Instead of giving up after hearing the word no way too often from record labels, he proved them all wrong by starting his very own Roc-A-Fella Records with partner Dame Dash and Kareem, also known as Biggs, Burke in 1995. Jay-Z explained what this early phase of his career was to MTV. I went to every single record label and they was like, this guy is terrible. He's nothing. I had to put Reasonable Doubt out myself because nobody would sign me. I would press up singles and go to the record stores myself, collect $100, $200, come back, give them some more records. It started like that. It made me appreciate it so much more. No one gave me anything. They didn't give me a record deal. I really just took my time and grew it step by step by step by step. I could have easily been like, maybe what I'm talking about ain't right. Nobody wants to sign me. That would have stopped the suffering. But I didn't. Named after John D. Rockefeller, one of the wealthiest Americans to ever live, Roc-A-Fella Records as a brand embodied the image of opulent wealth and lavish luxury to the fullest. From their champagne bottle logo to their audio salutes to Versace and Cristal, being that Jay-Z's first guest appearance on an album was with musical mentor G.O.O.D, who was also a neighbor when they were both living in the Marcy Projects housing complex in Brooklyn during the 80s. Was he ever asked to be a partner in Roc-A-Fella Records?
It was never talked about, but one thing I could say that I had opportunities to pitch, if you will, to have some type of paperwork on Jay, and I never wanted that. You know, some people may call me crazy, you know, hindsight.
Oh, because you could have signed him as a rapper early on.
Yeah, I could have signed him or signed him to a production deal and, or whatever the case may be. And I never chose that. And I say it now, like I've said it, I've said for over 30 years, or at least 30 years, I didn't want him to go through some of the rigors that I had to go through to get to a certain point.
The Roc, as the record label began to refer to themselves as, put out Jay's debut album Reasonable Doubt with distribution through Priority Records on June 25th, 1996. We did a video on Priority Records and their rise, and you could check it out in the description below. Although Reasonable Doubt would take time to become the blockbuster that it later became, it still tore up the summer with street anthems that are now hip-hop classics, such as Dead Presidents, Can't Knock the Hustle, featuring Mary J. Blige, and also Brooklyn's Finest, a duet with Notorious B.I.G., with production by the likes of DJ Premier, Irv Gotti, Ski Beats, Clark Kent, and G.O.O.D, and career-building appearances from Foxy Brown, Memphis Bleak, and Sauce Money. Reasonable Doubt left no doubt in the minds of the music industry that Jay didn't come to play, he came to make a mark for himself. The monumental debut album moved 43,000 copies during week one, and almost 10 times that amount in its first year of release. It was a slow burn. The success that it experienced helped Roc-A-Fella Records move off of Priority Records and step it up with partnership with Def Jam. Jay-Z's carefree, cool, rapid wit, and effortless depictions of street life upped the ante on rap music's fascination with the imagery that Cool G rap ushered back in the 80s. It was magnified and cemented a year earlier in 95 with Raekwon's Only Built for Cuban Links and also AZ's Do or Die, and continued onward with Nas's It Was Written, and later in 97, Notorious B.I.G.'s Life After Death. Reasonable Doubt put Jay-Z directly in the same conversation of these genuine New York City hip-hop kings, like Biggie, Nas, AZ, Raekwon, Ghostface Killah, and also the members of Wu-Tang Clan and Mobb Deep. The main difference was that Jay-Z entered this New York City hip-hop kingdom not just as a top-tier lyricist, but also as a co-owner of his own record label. But Jay also proved that he was much more than 1/3 owner of Roc-A-Fella. He was also the premier all-star player on that team as they entered into the leagues of rap music and the music industry. Competition was fierce at that time, with P. Diddy's Bad Boy Records stacked roster rolling out Notorious B.I.G., Mace, and the trio The Lox. Over on the West Coast, Roc-A-Fella also had to hold up their weight with Death Row Records, which were taking over Billboard charts with acts like Tupac, Snoop Dogg, and the Dogg Pound. Although it took 6 years for Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt to get its platinum selling status in 2002, it didn't stop the Roc-A-Fella hits from topping the music charts consistently. Excluding the low-selling attempt at R&B with the group Christian with their only album on the rock called Ghetto Serrano, and rapper Emil, who was the short-lived Lady of Roc-A-Fella, it was mostly a road paved with gold and platinum plaques for the office partners Jay, Dame, and Biggs. Even with Jay-Z expressing an early interest in staying behind the scenes on the business side, it was mostly Jay-Z's annual run of releases that kept the lights on. The Range Rover engines running and the bank accounts flowing in with millions and millions of dollars. Let's just take a quick look at Jay-Z's album sales from his second album, In My Lifetime Volume 1, all the way down to the Black Album, the project that was promoted as supposedly being his retirement album. So you had In My Lifetime Volume 1, a year after his debut, it's been platinum. Volume 2, 5 times platinum. Volume 3, 3 times platinum. The Dynasty, Rock La Familia, the group album, 2 times platinum. The Blueprint in 2001, 2 times platinum. Album number 7 was a joint duet project with R. Kelly called The Best of Both Worlds. It was platinum in 2002. The Blueprint 2, 3 times platinum. The Black Album, 3 times platinum. To make a long story short, between 96 and 2003, which was Roc-A-Fella's pre-Kanye West era of releasing albums, Jay had 9 albums, all selling 1 million copies or better. Out of all the other signees to the label, there was only one other platinum-selling album, and that was Come Home With Me by Cam'ron. Then there were 5 that went gold, and that was The Coming of Age by Memphis Bleek in 99, The Truth by Beanie Sigel in 2000, The Understanding by Memphis Bleek in 2000, The Reason by Beanie Sigel in 2001, and Diplomatic Immunity Classic album by The Diplomats in 2003. So in all honesty, Jay-Z's Volume 2 Hard Knock Life album alone outsold all of his other artists' albums combined between 1996 to 2003. This, of course, is before Kanye West changed the game a year later after Jay-Z's The Black Album in 2004 with The College Dropout, which has sold over 4 million copies and re-energized the whole label and industry as a whole. Prior to Ye's transition from being a hired producer to an artist on the mic, clearly the pressure was on Jay-Z's mic to keep rapping every year to ensure that The Rock remained the biggest on the block. But Jay-Z obviously had other ideas of what success looked like to him and wasn't looking to remain attached at the hip with Dame Dash and Kareem Burke. But what else transpired that finally pushed apart the Roc-A-Fella Records camp and turned it inside out? When it comes to the internal drama brewing at the Storied label, video producer Choke No Joke, who was hired at The Rock by Dame Dash, had a bird's eye view of the corporate crumbling that was taking place from the inside.
I was working at Roc-A-Fella for 4 years. Jay-Z never came to the office once. Wow. Now 4 years. So from the Blueprint 2 all the way up to the Black Album, he never came in office. I used to see him go see Leon though, but he would never come into the Roc-A-Fella office.
The unraveling of the bond between Jay and Dame stems from several loose threads. First off, there was more than one way that Roc-A-Fella was managed. Dame was apparently more accessible to artists on the label, along with being highly outspoken, we can say. Jay-Z was more distant and in artist mode a lot of the time, which makes sense because we already established that Jay was the main breadwinner for the company. But the loud flamboyance of Dame Dash wasn't always the way that the more laid-back Jay-Z wanted to run the company. Roc-A-Fella soldier and high-earning rapper Beanie Sigel was a respected hardcore rapper from Philadelphia that was once a flagship artist on Roc-A-Fella, who also had a whole hometown crew behind him called State Property, also signed to the label. Besides Beanie, State Property consisted of Freeway, Petey Crack, Young Chris, Neef Buck, Emilio Sparks, and Oshino Vasqueza, With that being said, Beanie had front row seat for the collapse of the company that was unfolding all around him, and he shared it publicly while sitting down with Global Grind TV. Beanie Siegel, while incarcerated, released his album The Becoming under Dame Dash Music Group. In contrast, State Property group members joined Jay-Z on the Def Jam-owned Roc-A-Fella Records. Beanie Siegel responded by putting State Property projects on hold, claiming he was disappointed by his label mates. Beanie Siegel was constantly in trouble, which worried Roc-A-Fella and Def Jam executives. Aside from legal trouble, he was waging an all-out war against Jadakiss and the Lox, trying to make a name for himself. In 2010, Beans laid out his point in a recent interview with Star and Buck Wild. "I ain't loyal to Dame," he said when asked about his time with Roc-A-Fella Records. "My lawyer found about $11 million that Damon Dash stole from me. I mean, he filed bankruptcy. I have a piece of paper that says he owes me some money. But who wants to go through that? I haven't seen or talked to Dame in roughly 5 years."
Aside from Jay-Z and Kanye West, the domination of Roc-A-Fella Records over the rap world during their run also stood upon the expansion of their operation with some of Dame's Harlem neighbors. Cameron and his crew, the Diplomats, Jim Jones, Joel Santana, Freaky Zeke, Hell Rel, 40 Cal, and more, that Dash brought into the Roc-A-Fella fold. The label signed Beanie Siegel, who would later establish State Property, and Cameron, who would later introduce the Diplomats. The recruitment of these artists and record labels helped lead Roc-A-Fella Records to its prime. But at pricey controversy between Jay-Z and Cameron began over the H to the Izzo beat, and Cameron discarding Jay-Z's verse from the original Oh Boy track. Dame Dash poured gasoline on the flame by offering Cameron the vice president position of Roc-A-Fella Records without Jay-Z's knowledge. Cameron years later expressed his position, claiming Jay-Z blocked him from the executive position. On the other hand, he also stated that executives were trying to lowball him with the $500,000 salary. Roc-A-Fella Records renewed their Def Jam contracts for a reported $20 million in 2004, which was a massive $19.5 million increase from their original 1997 deal. Dame's remarks to MTV inferred that he couldn't envision a life without Roc-A-Fella. At the time, Dame felt secure in their collective position in the music industry. "All that is paperwork. We'll never break up. It's Roc-A-Fella for life. I would never pass the torch or leave any of my artists. I look at them like my family, almost like my children. I would never leave them with anybody else. Who else could run Roc-A-Fella but me?" But this might have been Dame's way of keeping the sticky behind-the-scenes business quiet and out of the prying public eye, because within 6 months, Jay-Z chose to take on the role of Def Jam president after the remaining 50% stake of Roc-A-Fella Records was sold to their parent company. This wasn't a sudden move, because the tension had been brewing between Dame and Jay for years. For instance, in 2002, during Jay's vacation in the Mediterranean islands, a little bit of corporate restructuring was taking place behind his back, with Dame putting on a media event to appoint Dipset's Cameron and State Property leader Beanie Siegel as new vice presidents of Roc-A-Fella, with Jay-Z sending out the long-distance message that refuted these hirings as not being official and, in his words, a little premature. This surely put a divide between Jay-Z and the newer acts on the label. Then there was the viral video of Dame Dash exploding on Def Jam executives after barging into a meeting about Roc-A-Fella that he wasn't called about. As another clue that it wasn't all shiny in the Roc-A-Fella empire, Dame Dash produced a satirical comedy movie called Death of a Dynasty that actually incorporated the rumors surrounding the tension under their roof and would later actually end their dynasty for real. The first no turning back steps that moved towards the end of Roc-A-Fella Records came in 2004, when Def Jam Recordings, which had owned a 50% stake in Roc-A-Fella since '97, bought out the rest of the label, and Jay-Z made an agreement with them to become the president of Def Jam as well. Then in the fall of 2005, Jay-Z bought out Dame Dash's share of Rocawear, the hip-hop clothing line that they had been raking in millions from as an extension of the Roc-A-Fella brand. In a 2006 profile interview with New York Mag, Dame Dash opened up about where he was headed after the artists like Kanye West and Beanie Siegel stepped away from him and sided with Jay-Z career-wise. He depicted the night on December 2004 when Jay-Z informed him of the Def Jam offer he was looking to accept and how Roc-A-Fella artists mostly underperformed after Dash was no longer in the picture. "I said, go ahead and take the money and the job, but don't take the name. Don't take Roc-A-Fella with you. I didn't say please, but I might as well have," he said. "It's business, but we were always supposed to be about more than business. Jay especially. I did everything I possibly could so that he didn't have to raise his voice. He just had to whisper something in my ear, and I'd take care of it. The people I fought with to make money for him, Leor Cohen and Kevin Lyles, executives at Def Jam, he's made friends with. He hangs out with Puff now. It's like if your brother leaves you. Kanye's second record did fine, but no more than his first, and it had a lot more muscle behind it by that time. Memphis Bleak ain't what it was. Young Guns sold about a quarter of the number of records during their new album than their last one with me. I always went gold. From Dame's point of view, he felt that Jay-Z was yanked away from the Roc by Def Jam executives that he viewed as culture vultures, namely their president Leor Cohen. It was like they have people that their job is to create beef so that they can monetize it, pause, and they can't make any money or get any respect in their culture. That's why they're in our culture, because the minute that they're allowed to be there, they would go, but they just can't. Never had a beef with Jay, always with Leor and his whole crew. He's the one that ruined Roc-A-Fella. At the time that the Roc was rolling downhill, Jay-Z made his position known without openly hurling any disparaging remarks towards his former partners in the press. Jay-Z explained his situation by saying, "However, the situation happened. Whether we outgrew the situation or what have you, it was time for me to seek a new deal in the situation. While I was doing that, I was going to leave Roc-A-Fella Records. And if anybody can imagine building something from nothing and being the main driving force for that, and then having to leave all your legacy and everything behind, I know that'd be a tough situation for anyone. While I was seeking out another deal, whether it was the S. Carter Records or what have you, there was a deal on the table to be the president of Def Jam, continue running Roc-A-Fella, CEO, president of Roc-A-Fella also, and get all my masters back. But since I was the one that wanted to leave, I was like, let me try to figure out some way where everyone can be happy. So I said, let me have Reasonable Doubt. It's not a money thing. Reasonable Doubt, if you look at it, it sells whatever it sells in catalog, maybe $100,000 a year. It's very little money, but it meant everything to me because it was my baby. It was my first one, and it was also more of a principle thing. Just give me something to walk, something to hold on to. I don't want to walk away from Roc-A-Fella Records, if you can imagine that with nothing. So I was like, let me get Reasonable Doubt, and I'll give up the rest of my masters. Just give me my baby to hold on to so 10 years down the line, I can look back and I got something. I'm not empty-handed, and I was the one being offered everything. I thought it was more than fair, and when that was turned down, I had to make a choice. I'll leave that for the people to say what choice they would have made. That's about it. I don't really want to talk about Dame or Biggs. I don't have nothing negative to say about them. Kanye West may be one of the loudest voices in rap music right now, but back in 2004 when Ye was dropping his first album, The College Dropout, Roc-A-Fella was getting ready to drop their remaining 50% ownership to their parent company, the Island Def Jam Music Group, for a reported $10 million, with Def Jam getting to keep many of the Roc's biggest names like Beanie Sigel, Memphis Bleak, and of course, Kanye West, with Jay-Z still running the show. Oddly enough, Jay-Z was the one that wasn't too keen on having Kanye become a rapper in the first place, especially during an era where more hardcore acts like Beanie Sigel and 50 Cent dominated rap at the time. Roc-A-Fella's co-founder Kareem Biggs Burke shared his feelings on the departure of Kanye when he went on to work with Jay-Z. There was an opportunity where we could have taken Kanye to another label, and we would have still been in the Kanye business for several years after that, but we decided to leave him on Def Jam. That's one thing that I wish I were better prepared for, especially seeing how big he's become in launching his career from where it all started. Kanye is a very creative person, but at the same time, we would have probably been able to help him with other business outside of music. Those are the things that I usually concentrate on. Even early on with what we did at Roc-A-Fella, I was the person who brought all those other opportunities. I don't really steer artists creatively. I try to help them do things outside of music. The most rewarding part of my life is seeing people that I work with build their own businesses. It's always a family atmosphere, which I love, but I also enjoy seeing them be successful on their own. One element that put a wedge between business and pleasure for Jay and Dame was women. In music videos, they were surrounded by women, amplifying their playboy image, but in real life behind closed doors, there were two women in particular that have been said to have created tension between these two co-CEOs of Roc-A-Fella Records. First off was Aaliyah, the young R&B star that R. Kelly once married when she was allegedly only 15. Speaking of R. Kelly, Dame Dash has stated that he wasn't too happy about Jay doing an entire album on Roc-A-Fella in 2002 with the since disgraced singer who on September 27, 2022, court jury found him guilty on 9 counts of a bunch of different things. Dame's opinion was, if you remember the best of both worlds, you don't see my name on that. I never wanted no part of that. I know I'm not messing with that. I knew, morally, we weren't the same, referring to Jay. So to me, Roc-A-Fella was defunct. It was over. I couldn't mess with it. It was something that, to me, I don't want to say unforgivable, but I couldn't understand it. New York City's Hot 97 DJ Funkmaster Flex had spoken up on Instagram to shame Day for moving in on Aaliyah after she had been linked to Jay-Z first. That was Jay-Z lady first. Dame did a snake move. Tell me I'm lying, you piece of shit. That's why the Rock crumbled. You was touching Jay-Z chick. Remember the house in the Hamptons. Choke No Joke, the videographer who captured the footage of Dame Dash's famous profanity-filled screaming during a marketing meeting for Jay that Dame wasn't invited to, has made the suggestion that Dame Dash tried to not only take Aaliyah from Jay, but also Beyonce at one point. According to Choke No Joke, I mean, nothing happened, like he kissed or sexed her or something like that. Did he try to holler at her? Yeah, that's the same thing he did with Aaliyah. Aaliyah fell for it. Beyonce wasn't going to violate Jay like that. We all knew there was a point at Roc-A-Fella where Dame wasn't allowed around Beyonce. Everybody that worked there at that time knew, because he was a creep. Dame went behind his back and hollered at Aaliyah just like he did with Beyonce. But like I said, Beyonce wasn't going for that stuff. And the only reason why Aaliyah might have gone for it was because he wouldn't be public with her and try to keep that stuff private. After the time of Aaliyah's death that took place on August 25, 2001 due to a plane crash in the Bahamas, Dame Dash had confirmed that marriage could have been in the cards for the two. She was the best person I ever knew. I never met a person like her in my life. Every day that we were together, we cherished. Every memory. Every day was a special event. Whether it was going to a store or going to a movie or just sitting in a house, wherever we were was like our own little party, in our own little world. She was the only girl that got to hang out with my homeboys on the level of a homeboy. It was like being able to be with your homeboy and your girl at the same time. We just genuinely had a lot of fun together. We were definitely going to be married. As soon as she had time, we were getting married. Like after The Matrix. She was the one. She was definitely the one for me. It wasn't an official proposal. We had just talked about it, you know. She would just carry herself like such a normal individual. We just would pop into McDonald's or Wendy's or something, and people just wouldn't believe it. After Jay-Z sailed off into the sunset as his own business entity, his ex-partners Dame and Biggs established their own record label, the Dame Dash Music Group. After every Roc-A-Fella artist had their pick of either going with Jay or staying with Dame and Biggs, it was the Harlem home team of Cameron and the Diplomats that worked with Dame Dash Music Group. Cam even publicly dissed Jay-Z in songs and interviews, with the full support of Dame. Imagine how awkward that rivalry must have been, considering the Dame Dash Music Group was still distributed by Def Jam for a while, the company Jay-Z had become the president of. Then, years later, on May 21, 2009, Jay-Z bought back his own recording contract and record label from Def Jam Recordings for $5 million, and would resign from his position as CEO of Def Jam Records sometime after that. Roc Nation, the new version of Roc-A-Fella that Jay created in 2008, brokered a dynamic $150 million distribution deal with the concert company Live Nation. But as we all know, Jay-Z went on to really live his lyrics when he once rhymed, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman," as he entered the Billionaire Boys Club, which he now accompanies a couple of other massive acts, one of them being Kanye West, another being Puff.
During the heights of Death Row Records, there was a robust 4-year period in the 90s when this West Coast home of gangster rap sold over 18 million albums and racked up profits in the area of $300+ million. But when it all came crashing down, you have to wonder, did the death of Death Row Records actually begin with the negative energy surrounding the name itself? Was this fall from grace destined to happen all along? And could it have quite possibly been predicted by the power of a company title like Death Row that was strong enough to actually attract that kind of energy into existence? Or did it manifest, the name that is, likely because of what the founders were already engaged in? In the legal system, death row is where men and women convicted of extreme crimes end up in order to await legalized execution. Death Row Records, on the other hand, was a place where many of its artists witnessed or experienced brutal violence, gang intimidation, and some of them death. Death Row, the record label that made its mark by making and marketing the subgenre of gangster rap, was co-founded in Southern California in 1992 by one of the most celebrated hip-hop producers, Dr. Dre, and Suge Knight, one of the most feared executives in the music industry. Like it or not, the legacy of the company has proven to be littered with platinum and gold plaques on the outside, but cursed by evil on the inside. Before you assume that this is the beginning of some conspiracy theory, we'll just stick to the facts. By the end of 1996, just 4 years into doing business, Dr. Dre had already completely left his own label. The organization's biggest star, Tupac, was tragically killed. Their top-tier artist, Snoop Dogg, had released an album that tanked, and Death Row boss Suge Knight was stuck behind bars. Obviously, this is not the final year when Death Row was executed as a label, but it was a rude awakening that their business model wasn't bulletproof. Before we examine the burial of this once dominant rap label that was home to West Coast superpowers like Dre, Snoop, Tupac, the Dog Pound members, Corrupt and Daz Dillinger, the Lady of Rage, Nate Dogg, Pac's crew, the Outlaws, MC Hammer, Left Eye, let's identify the nails in the coffin that ultimately led to their demise. First, let's hit the rewind button back to the late 80s, before Dre was one of the richest hip-hop producers ever to press a record, and was bringing beats to life for his group NWA with Ice Cube, MC Ren, Eazy-E, and DJ Yella. Dr. Dre was locked into a recording contract with Eazy-E's Ruthless Records that he ran with partner Jerry Heller. Dr. Dre wasn't just a pivotal member of the controversial group NWA that had even received a message from the FBI in response to their song F the Police. Dre was also in charge of production at Ruthless, making him musically responsible for the sounds of numerous songs and albums in the company's catalog. Being the maestro of Ruthless Records' own golden era before the label made a post-Dre rebound with the platinum explosion of Bone Thugs and Harmony, Dr. Dre began to accuse the operations over at Ruthless Records of malpractice. In fact, with Ice Cube leaving Ruthless Records in 1989 for similar financial issues that he expressed to Jerry Heller, Dre wouldn't be far behind. After Dre felt completely underpaid for the overflowing success that his hard work was generating, including producing for not only NWA but also Eazy-E, the DOC, J-Fad, and Above the Law, Dre's alliance with Suge Knight would begin to take shape. Suge Knight and rapper the DOC went over Dre's Ruthless Records with a lawyer. Convinced that Jerry Heller was dishonest, they approached Dr. Dre about forming a label with them, away from Heller. Allegedly using strong-arm tactics, Suge Knight was able to procure contracts from Eazy-E for the release of the DOC, Dr. Dre, and Michelle. Dr. Dre and Suge Knight joined partners, the DOC and Dick Griffey, and started a record label and music partnership originally called Future Shock. But the DOC suggested that they switch the name to Death Row, playing off the New York-based hip-hop label Def Jam. This wasn't able to happen due to the fact that this name was already owned by one of Dre's previous music associates known as the Unknown DJ, who later sold the naming rights for Death Row to Dr. Dre and his partners in 1991. Then, by 1992, Death Row became Death Row, and the name changed to its eventual title of Death Row. The DOC spoke with Vlad TV to explain how that core group came together to get Death Row started. I put Suge and Dre together so that we can build this other thing. You know, Dre, we could do it. This guy can help us. Suge facilitated some of the business, some of the things we needed in business to move forward through Dick Griffey. It was going to be whatever the hell we wanted it to be. But we had to get it established first. So we built this company and started making deals to facilitate the use of making these records. Once things started going rolling, Snoop came in, and Dick helped bring deals to the table that they brought money in, and it was all to make the records. As the record started to pull itself together, then things started to change on the business front, and to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know when the moment was that Dre and Suge went like that, but I was no longer really involved in those conversations, and I was in a bad spot. Knight approached Michael Harry O. Harris, a businessman who was the first African American to produce a theatrical show on Broadway, was also incarcerated on drug and attempted murder charges. Through the attorney David Kenner, who was handling Harris's appeal, Harrio allegedly infused $1.5 million in startup capital into Death Row Records and established a parent company for Death Row called Godfather. The lawyer David Kenner would also go on to becoming a key part of the Death Row camp, working as an attorney for Death Row Records, Suge Knight, Tupac, Snoop Dogg, and producer Scott Storch, who was working with Dr. Dre on the production end. But Dre didn't just slip away from Ruthless Records without stirring up some controversy. Eazy-E's partner in Ruthless and NWA's previous manager Jerry Heller spoke in an interview with Murder Master Music Show about how Eazy-E really felt about Suge Knight. One day I came into the office and one of my clients and Eazy were talking, and I said, "What's going on here?" And Eazy said, "You know this guy Suge Knight?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm going to kill him. This guy's going to be a problem, and I'm going to kill him." I should have let him kill him. I would have done the world a favor. He would have done it, for sure, by himself. But the assistance from Harry O wouldn't be the only investment capital that Suge Knight would end up arranging on behalf of Death Row Records. There's also the mythical story of Suge intimidating the early 90s pop rapper Vanilla Ice. That scary interaction began with Suge's management connections with Mario Johnson, also known as Chocolate, who was claimed to have produced Vanilla Ice's biggest hit of his career, the song Ice Ice Baby, and had apparently not received any royalties payments for his efforts. The way that the story goes is that Suge ran up on Vanilla Ice on several occasions, including one alleged attempt to lure Vanilla Ice into a van packed with Bloods and Crips. Ultimately, Knight arrived at Vanilla Ice's hotel suite in the Bellage Hotel on the 15th floor, accompanied by Chocolate and a member of the LA Raiders. The way that Vanilla Ice has explained the situation is, I went to my hotel room and Suge was in there with several people. He let me know he wanted to get some points off the record Ice Ice Baby. Suge took me out on the balcony. He had me look over the edge, showing me how high I was up there. I needed to wear a diaper that day. I was an investor in Death Row Records with no return on my money. When it was all said and done, Ice signed over 25% of his Ice Ice Baby royalties to Suge, but he denied that he was dangled from the balcony as the tale has been repeatedly told. But Ice did admit that he was forced into the deal by Suge Knight. The story of Death Row Records isn't a total horror show. It was also one of triumphant victory. David Kenner helped Suge Knight sign up California-based artists, and in lining up creation for the soundtrack of the '92 film Deep Cover, with the self-titled single Deep Cover, showing the world that Dre was a solo artist and had a young prodigy under his wing called Snoop Dogg, who was prominently featured on Dre's solo album The Chronic, that also dropped in '92. The Chronic, which beside Dr. Dre and Snoop showcased the extended Death Row family of Corrupt, Nate Dogg, Lady of Rage, the DOC, RBX, has since sold well over 5 million copies. But at that time, it would get certified at the astonishingly high level of triple platinum. In 1993, there was a massive demand for a Snoop Dogg solo project, and when those desires were met with Snoop's debut, Doggy Style, it sold even better than The Chronic at quadruple platinum. Death Row Records managed to release at least 13 other albums that sold 1 million copies or more. Soon after the Snoop Dogg solo Doggy Style, he sadly got charged with murder, being that it was said he was driving the Jeep from which his bodyguard, McKinley Lee, admittedly shot a 20-year-old man named Philip Waldemariam in 1993. Snoop's defense stated that since Waldemariam was armed with a gun and was pulling it, the shooting of him was a self-defense situation. To make matters even worse, this murder trial put Snoop in further hot water with politician C. Dolores Tucker and vice presidential candidate Dan Quayle that were highly critical of gangster rap to begin with. They made the claim that it was degrading to black women, against American values, and also concerned that it encouraged violence towards police officers. It would take a few years from 1993 to 1996 for Snoop to receive the relief of an innocent verdict in court, making Snoop a free man who could have had a lengthy potential prison sentence hanging over his head. In the mid-90s, Puff Daddy's Bad Boy Records was the hottest label in New York City, and Suge Knight's Death Row Records was the hottest in Los Angeles. This coastal rivalry of the East versus West was incited by several incidents that involved Puff and Suge. First of all, there's that time where Suge allegedly snatched Jodeci and Mary J. Blige out of their contracts with Uptown Records, two artists Puff worked with while he worked for Andre Harrell at Uptown. There was the time at the second annual Source Awards where Suge seemed to be dissing Puffy in his own sitting when he got on stage and told artists to come over to Death Row if they were sick of the CEO dancing in their videos. Then there was a much more dangerous situation on September 24th, 1995, at a party for Jermaine Dupri in Atlanta at the Platinum House nightclub, where the Bad Boy Records crew had a tense dispute with Suge and Suge's friend Jai Hassan Jamal, Big Jake, Robles, a Bloods gang member and Death Row bodyguard. Eyewitnesses have said that after Puff and Suge argued inside the club, minutes later outside the club, Puff's childhood friend and bodyguard, Anthony Wolf Jones, aimed a gun at Suge's friend Big Jake, who was fatally shot while entering Suge's car. Then, when Tupac let off shots in the New York City recording studio that Bad Boy's biggest artist, Notorious B.I.G., happened to be in, it became an all-out East Coast versus West Coast battle, with Pac and Big at the forefront, diss records getting recorded, and unfortunately, both men getting shot to death in unsolved murders. Then, when Mark Anthony Bell, who went to high school with Diddy, went to the party with a friend that had done several photography jobs with Death Row. Before going to the party, Bell was asked to provide Suge with information about Diddy following the death of his friend Big Jake, which Suge allegedly held Diddy responsible. After Bell declined to provide information when approached at the Death Row offices, he was later asked again at the Christmas party, which led to Bell allegedly being beaten in a private room, including how Suge paid Bell $600,000 after the incident. Alex Roberts, who was former head of business affairs at Death Row, said the following: "The East Coast-West Coast thing was great for business. There was a beef, but we leveraged it to sell records more than anything else. It sold one hell of a lot of records. I'd tell people to look at the positives. Just don't push it too far, and nobody needs to get shot. If you're pushing it too far, you might as well go back to the hood and stand on a corner where you have to win every second of the day. The Heat wins once, and you're done." Dre and Easy and Cube, they'd worked so hard to get away from that life and get welcomed into Beverly Hills. It's insane how this quote applies as much as it did back then, today. On March 22, 1996, due to the infighting, Dr. Dre officially left Death Row Records completely to start his own musical imprint, Aftermath, which pushed Tupac to turn against Dre and consider him a disloyal enemy. For Dre to leave behind this legacy he helped build from the ground up says a lot about just how toxic that environment inside Death Row had become. Tim Nitz, an audio engineer who worked for Death Row, described the danger by saying, "Can-Am Studios was a place that Death Row had leased for like 2 years. Once you're in there, there was this constant, I gotta watch my back in here vibe. There were stories of Suge Knight having a big office called the Red Room. There were rumors about how this one guy, this videographer, did a video for them, and something went wrong, and they made him go in there and drink piss. It wasn't the ideal environment for an engineer. I go in, and like Nate Dogg is sitting behind me on the couch with a pistol, and I'm like, wow, my back's to the guy with a gun." Not only did the co-founder and producer Dr. Dre leave Death Row, but their biggest star, Tupac, left everyone while on Death Row when he was killed in a vehicle that was also being driven by Suge Knight. With all the music that Pac left behind, it was essentially all recorded during a short 5-year career between 91 and 96. Alex Roberts, who was former head of business affairs at Death Row, explained, "The rumors of Pac leaving Death Row were true. He wanted to marry Quincy Jones' daughter. Quincy said to Pac, 'Are you going to be able to get out clean without any trouble? You think you'll be okay?' I told Pac, 'I know Suge's been good to you, but by the same token, do you have anything in your name? Do you know how much money you've made?' Pac started thinking about it. He had all the watches, the gold jewelry, drove whatever he wanted, but nothing was in his name. I was really close to Suge, and I'd brought it up before. He'd go, 'Alex, I'm doing it because they're going to take that money, whether it's $100,000 or $200,000 or $500,000, get it on a Friday, and we wouldn't see them for a week. And then they'd be calling saying, hey, I'm in Vegas, and I'm broke.'" With Suge Knight keeping control of Death Row Records from behind bars, he started fueling smear campaigns against past Death Row members. And we're not even going to get into the lengthy history of Suge Knight and his arrests. I mean, he had domestic violence arrests. He's had probation violations for assault at a studio. 1995, he pled guilty to felony for armed robbery. Many, many, many other crimes. But he eventually found himself in jail, one of the many times. And death threats were sent back and forth, and Snoop Dogg publicly had harsh words for Suge Knight with his diss track called Pimp Slap. Snoop left Death Row, and eventually the label's name temporarily was rebranded as The Row, supporting itself with releases from the vaults, unreleased Tupac material, and compilation records such as Suge Knight Represents Chronic 2000. Suge tried to build back up the roster with Crooked I, member of the supergroup Slaughterhouse that included Joe Budden, Royce da 5'9", and Joell Ortiz. Corrupt would come back and take a vice president position, which kept him in conflict with his Dog Pound member Daz Dillinger, as well as Snoop. Left Eye from TLC got involved under the name NINA, New Identity Not Applicable, until her death in April 2002. But this all fell apart. Corrupt left again after stating that he stuck around for 5 years on the label with no album release. Crooked I left, along with rappers Petey Pablo and The Realist. April 4, 2006 was financially a dark day over at both Death Row Records, with both the company itself and its head honcho Suge Knight filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. This decision was made following the appointment of a receiver to acquire and auction off Suge's and Death Row's assets in the civil case filed against Suge Knight by Lydia Harris, ex-wife of Harry O, who both helped get the label off the ground. The list of unsecured creditors to Death Row included Lydia Harris, Harry O, the IRS, $6.9 million, Coke Records, $3.4 million, and Interscope Records, $2.5 million, along with numerous Death Row artists previously signed to the label that said they were owed money. Suge Knight eventually lost control of Death Row Records altogether. The sad state of affairs for Death Row Records is that it went from one of rap music's biggest powerhouses to a collection of intellectual property getting sold to the highest bidder, all of which were outside the realm of hip-hop. The first buyer was Wide Awake Entertainment Group, based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. On January 15, 2009, Death Row Records was successfully auctioned to entertainment development company Wide Awake for only $18 million. Wide Awake Entertainment made a leveraged purchase of Death Row Records in part thanks to financing provided by New Solutions Financial Corporation. 10 days later, on January 25, 2009, an auction was held for everything found in Death Row's office after it filed for bankruptcy. Even after Death Row was sold, the acquisition, old material from the archives was being dug up and sold from artists such as Snoop Dogg, Corrupt, Danny Boy, Crooked I, LBC Crew, and more. Wide Awake's own bankruptcy led to Death Row changing hands again when the label was sold off to E1 Music in 2013. So this has been exchanging a lot of hands over the years. Then, believe it or not, Death Row Records became a division of Hasbro, the same toy company known for toy brands like Transformers, My Little Pony, Monopoly, and G.I. Joe. When Hasbro purchased E1 for $4 billion in August of 2019, the game of musical chairs continued again in June of 2021 when E1 got bought again by Blackstone. In September 2021, E1 Music was rebranded as MNRK Music Group. Then, on February 9, 2022, it all came full circle. The story of the death of Death Row had a huge plot twist. Snoop Dogg, one of Death Row's earliest artists, back when Dre was still a co-owner, bought Death Row Records from the Blackstone-owned MNRK Music Group, which was formerly known as E1 Music. Snoop Dogg and Blackstone, the investment firm that owns MNRK, announced the deal, with Snoop saying in a press release, "I'm thrilled and appreciative of the opportunity to acquire the iconic and culturally significant Death Row Records brand, which has immense untapped future value. It feels good to have ownership of the label I was part of at the beginning of my career, and as one of the founding members, this is an extremely meaningful moment for me. I would like to personally thank the teams at Blackstone, MNRK, and especially David Kessenbaum, who worked collaboratively with me over several months to make this exciting homecoming a reality. I'm looking forward to building the next chapter of Death Row Records." Since then, Dr. Dre's classic album The Chronic, as well as Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style, have been removed from all streaming platforms, with an announcement back in April that Snoop Dogg was planning on starting a streaming service that would pay out higher rates than the other big players in the game, as well as something to do with being involved with crypto, but nothing is really manifested as of yet, other than us losing the ability to listen to two major albums in hip-hop history and one of the two most recognizable albums in Death Row Records history. Running a record label was the biggest mistake I ever made. I never asked to be a label owner. Kanye West's Good Music label is officially dead now, but this has been a long time coming, and unfortunately for many fans of good music, it will not be coming back anytime in the near future. But how did Good Music even start? When did it dominate? And how did it go from dominating the rap game as one of the premier labels and cliques to now being absolutely defunct? Good Music was founded in 2004, together with Sony BMG almost immediately after Ye released his debut studio album, The College Dropout. The first signees to the label were fellow Chicago rapper Common and singer John Legend. This was already a great start with John Legend. There weren't many performers that were able to stick it out on Good Music as long as singer-songwriter John Legend. A total of 12 years, the first black male artist to win all 4 major American Entertainment Awards, the Oscars for movies, the Grammys for music, the Emmy for television, and the Tony for Broadway theater. His first Good Music release and debut album was Get Lifted in 2004, which would sell 107,000 copies first week, debuting at number 7 and winning 3 Grammys that same year. The second Good Music release would be in 2005, Common's B. Far from a debut album, Common is the Chicago pioneer who paved the way for rappers like Kanye from the Windy City, dropping albums since 1992 and collaborating in the late 90s and 2000s with the creative collective known as the Soulquarians, with Questlove from The Roots, Jay Dilla, Q-Tip, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Erykah Badu, D'Angelo. Common re-energized his career after a mixed response to his more experimental album Electric Circus. The release of B was met with glowing reviews by any and every outlet, now being recognized unanimously as a classic hip-hop album and staple. It debuted at number 2, selling 185,000 copies, and would be nominated for 4 Grammys, but unfortunately not winning any that year. However, this was a great start for Ye's label as he now had 2 very successful albums and artists within just a year's span, disregarding his own solo projects. John Legend would follow up in 2006 with the second album once again, debuting at number 3 with 231,000 sold first week, with number 1 going to Disney's Hannah Montana album and number 2 to My Chemical Romance's The Black Parade. He would be nominated for 2 Grammys and win 1 for this project. It is now 2007, and we get the first ever Consequence release on Good Music, Don't Quit Your Day Job, that would debut at 113 on the Billboard 200, selling a measly 7,500 copies first week. This album featured DJ Khaled, surprisingly, Kanye West, and John Legend. But Consequence, getting media attention for the low sales, was confident in his project, issuing a statement on his MySpace that for anyone who bought the album but didn't enjoy it, could receive a refund if they messaged him, saying, "It ain't really about being cocky or confident. It's just that I believe I grew up off hip-hop, so I know what I put out. I wouldn't even make a statement like that if I didn't really believe in my heart that this album wasn't contrary to the statement hip-hop is dead, given my legacy of where I come from. The kind of hip-hop that I do now is the rarity. This project and the music that's on there and the type of hip-hop that it represents means this much to me. Because if I let this die, then essentially everything that I grew up on is dead. That's what you're trying to tell me? And I don't believe that. I put the record out through the vehicle of Red because I was hoping that with all the things that I had done, I could come out to 10,000 first week. I came close. I didn't know when I was going to have the option to utilize the promotion engine of Sony, and that's why I chose to go this route, because I felt that it was important to get the music out, to get the message out. A lot of people wouldn't have even gambled with their reputation like that. So even back then, first week sales were enough to deter someone from listening to a project. And it gives greater context to the sales since Red Distribution is a much smaller distributor than Sony. It's an arm underneath Sony, which made a big difference in 2007 when physical sales were still king. And it looks like the gamble didn't really work out because we hadn't seen a Consequence album on Good Music after this. It also gives some insight that even back then, hip-hop was beginning to shift in sound and style. If you listen to this mixtape, it's a beautiful insight to hear one of Ye's writers rap because you immediately think of Kanye's raps. This would unfortunately, like I said, be Consequence's last release on Good Music. These were Good Music signees, and while John Legend and Common had great releases with about 1 or 2 projects a year, Common going number 1 with his album Finding Forever, there was no such thing as a dominant Good Music era, posse, clique, no pun intended, until we got the signings of Big Sean, Kid Cudi, and Pusha T in the late 2000s. Big Sean's signing was due to him freestyling for Kanye West when he was at a radio station. Sean was always at this local radio station in Detroit that would host weekly rap contests. But in 2005, while Ye was at the station, Sean performed a freestyle which Ye was reluctant to hear at first, but eventually obliged. Big Sean recalled the incident, saying, "As we get to the entrance of the radio station, we stopped in the middle of the doorway. He starts looking at me and bobbing his head. He would give Ye his demo tape, but he wouldn't be officially signed to Good Music until 2007. Kid Cudi's signing is a bit hazy as well. He had met Kanye twice. The first run-in was in 2006 at the Virgin Megastore, where he elaborates in a Spin magazine interview saying, "I was looking at CDs, saw the gleam of a Jesus piece in the right side of my eye, looked up, and it was Kanye West. I said, we'll be working together one day soon." Kid Cudi would run into Kanye again at the Bape store. "I remember Kanye coming in one time and I was helping him get a couple things. I forgot to take a sensor off of one of the jackets he bought and I had to run out the store to catch him before he left. Pretty funny, me chasing after him in Soho." It wouldn't be until Cudi's release of Day and Night that would be posted on many music blogs that got the attention of Ye, who was at the release party for Cudi's 2008 mixtape A Kid Named Cudi, is what got him signed to G.O.O.D. Kid Cudi would go on to stamp his influence on the creation of Kanye West's 808s and Heartbreak album heavily, including co-writing major songs on that album such as Heartless, Welcome to Heartbreak, RoboCop, and Paranoid. Day and Night would then officially be released through Good Music with Motown distribution and become their biggest hit, peaking at number 3 on the Hot 100, with countless remixes and recognition across multiple genres internationally. This would lead up to Kid Cudi's debut album, Man on the Moon, in 2009, that was narrated by Common, selling 104,000 copies first week, with a debut at number 4. Both Day and Night and Make Her Say were nominated for the 2010 Grammy Awards. Big Sean was still putting out his finally famous mixtapes during this time. Ye was gearing up to release My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and in the midst of that promo, only 2 weeks before Ye's album release, Kid Cudi would put out his second album, Man on the Moon 2, with the single Erase Me with Kanye West. This album would sell 169K first week, debuting at number 3 on the Billboard album charts. This didn't receive any big nominations, not really that great of a commercial reception, although it sold better than Man on the Moon 1. But for Ye fans, Cudi fans, and hip-hop fans, this became a cult classic whose impact was not represented by the numbers it did, but it would go on to inspire countless other rappers and artists in the future who have cited these two albums as their inspiration. In 2010, Pusha T was welcomed to Good Music for his solo career, with a big appearance on Kanye's Runaway from My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Sci-Hi the Prince was also welcomed that same year, with appearances across multiple Kanye Good Friday releases, as well as being a feature on the track So Appalled on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Sci-Hi would just release mixtapes for the foreseeable future, however. Big Sean released his debut album Finally Famous in June of 2011, with the support of singles Dance, Ass, Marvin Gaye and Chardonnay, and My Last, but sold a mere 87K first week. Despite that, it was well received within hip-hop, and the Good Music troops were mobilized for what was to come. We would continue to see Good Music artists collaborate with each other, but what got people really going was when Ye announced Cruel Summer in October of 2011, a compilation project that was announced by Kanye for Good Music. But before anything related to it dropped, Kid Cudi released Wizard, which was his indie band. In February, a direction relatively different from what he had been on, with a single that drew some attention, Teleport to Me. But that album was not really received well by Cudi fans or commercially. Next was full-on Cruel Summer. The first release and single was Mercy with Pusha T, Big Sean, and honorary Good collaborator 2 Chainz, with a cameo by Kid Cudi in the music video on April 3rd of 2012. The song came before the video as part of Kanye's Good Friday series, debuting on Funkmaster Flex's radio show, then being available for download the next day on Kanye's website. It would go on to peak at number 13 on the Hot 100. Cold, or Theraflu, was the next to drop with DJ Khaled as a second album single 2 weeks later, where Ye infamously rapped Tell Peter My Mink is Dragging on the Floor. The next single was New God Flow in July, a collaboration between Pusha T and Kanye West with a performance and premiere at the BET Awards. Then the fourth single, Click, with Kanye, Jay-Z, and Big Sean. The I Don't Like remix with Pusha T and Big Sean was also released during this time, and on September 14th, 2012, Cruel Summer was officially released with sales of 205K first week, debuting at number 2. A big debut, the fans loved it, and interestingly enough, a new Good Music member was added during this time who was credited for production on the song The Morning that is damn near a whole Good Music posse cut with Sci-Hi, Cudi, Common, Pusha, and 2 Chainz. That's none other than Jacques Webster, aka Travis Scott. Travis also appeared as a feature on the song Sin City with John Legend, Tiana Taylor, Sci-Hi, and Malik Yusuf. He was signed to a deal with T.I.'s Grand Hustle, but he had a publishing deal, I believe, as a producer with Good Music. Either way, Cruel Summer incorporated everyone, from Tiana Taylor and John Legend to Common, Jay-Z, Pusha, and more. However, one major player that only had a small appearance on this project was Kid Cudi with the song Creepers, and a very small appearance on The Morning. These are the comments Cudi had. I was a little disappointed, but Kanye had a vision for that. Whatever that vision was didn't include much of me. I was bummed because I could have contributed. I'm a good asset. But he had a different vision. Everyone that was showcased on the album did their thing, and they needed that at that time. The energy was on some hip-hop stuff. I was on Wizard, doing my rock stuff. But I'm not tripping. Creepers was a jam I was holding on to for a while. It was waiting for that perfect platform, and it happened to be great for that album. It would have been dope to have more. I want to apologize to the fans for not having more, but, it ain't my fault. Some, me being some, would say this was the peak of good music. Everyone on the label was killing it in their own way. Travis Scott was an up-and-coming talent who just had an appearance on Meek Mill's Dream Chasers 2 and hype for his upcoming debut commercial mixtape, Owl Pharaoh. Sci-Hi the Prince was hot through his features and Royal Flush 1 and 2 and Ivy League Club mixtapes. John Legend was still established as a star. Pusha T's solo career was warming up after his Fear of God mixtape and EP follow-up, with Wrath of Cain set to release in 2013. Big Sean had released his Detroit mixtape as well, one of his fan favorites, and while not officially signed to them, 2 Chainz's name change was going phenomenal with his album based on a true story debuting at number 1, selling 147K first week. But a peak is the beginning of the direction towards a trough. And that's where we found ourselves after Kid Cudi's next and last album on Good Music, Indicud, was released. Cudi said there would be features from Kanye West, Common, and Pusha T. But when Indicud was released in April of 2013, there wasn't a single feature from a Good Music artist. We also saw Kid Cudi less involved and around the rest of the Good crew. That same month, while doing press, he announced that he was no longer Good. Kanye and I were talking on the phone the other day, and these are things I've been wanting to talk to him about. Me starting my own direction, and he got it because he's trying to start his new path and try new things as an artist. And he was just like, man, I feel you as an artist. It's cool, whatever. But this wasn't abrupt. He admitted to having made the decision to leave 6 months prior when he consulted Don C and Jay-Z for some insight. I went through a process where I talked to Don C, and then I went and talked to Jay-Z and got their opinions about how to approach him about things that I wanted to talk to him about. And everybody gave me their blessing. One man doesn't stop the show, though, and the rest of 2013 was full of releases, one of which was Yeezus releasing in June. Kid Cudi was very briefly featured on it with vocals on the track Guilt Trip. He wasn't too happy with that. I discovered that I was on the song via Twitter. I saw kids hitting me up like, "Are you on Guilt Trip?" or saying, "Great job." And I'm like, what the hell is everyone talking about? He explained that he recognized the song and the beat instantly once he listened. He was initially pleased, but quickly changed his mind. Why not call me and have me come in there and give it? Why underuse me? Why put 4 bars of vocals to coax my fans into thinking this is a legitimate Kid Cudi feature on the song, and it isn't? Same deal with the Good Music album, the compilation. Had I not given Kanye Creepers, my only presence would have been on that one song that I can't even remember the title for. I would have barely been on that album. It's interesting that Cudi's take on Cruel Summer changed here because he had said before that partially one of the reasons that he wasn't on Cruel Summer was because he was focused on a completely different style of music at the time. But he did express disappointment that he wasn't on Cruel Summer. So perhaps they intentionally didn't want him on there because of the sound that he was focusing on. And Kid Cudi would have loved to be on there, like he said. I guess we'll truly never know what was going on. But Yeezus had production from Travis Scott on New Slaves and Guilt Trip, with some small contribution by Pusha T too. This album would be followed by Big Sean's Hall of Fame release in August that had a Kid Cudi feature on it, and mainly produced by Good Music elder No ID. John Legend would also release an album, but the big release was Pusha T's debut solo album and first album on Good Music, My Name Is My Name. There was tremendous hype leading up to this release. All of Pusha's features, his mixtapes, and now finally his own solo project, executively produced by Kanye West. While commercially it debuted at number 4, selling 74,000 copies first week, it did not disappoint the fans. It was critically acclaimed and topping nearly every end-of-year album list for 2013. After this is where I would say the good music slump came in. Pusha T was now a strongly established solo artist. Ye was, well, Ye. Big Sean was doing his thing. Kid Cudi was gone, and so was his friendship with Kanye. There was no longer that feeling of a cohesive, good music unit moving around anymore. In 2014, the only release was Teyana Taylor, who, while a contributing member of Good Music, she, like John Legend, wasn't seen as part of the posse like the other people I named. In 2015, Pusha T was teasing his upcoming album King Push and releasing a precursor, The Darkest Before Dawn, which was also received well. Big Sean released arguably his best project ever in 2015 with Dark Sky Paradise, selling 173,000 first week and debuting at number 1. Sci-Hi the Prince would also end up leaving the label the same year. I had 4 deals on the table after I left Kanye and Def Jam. Kanye's family, but everything that's done with Kanye has to go through Def Jam. So I'm over at Sony now. I did that situation over there. It took about a year and a half to finish it all up. It was never a breakdown with Good Music. It was the fact that I was signed to Akon prior to being signed to Good Music. The thing about me was I had a situation at Def Jam already. They just didn't like the music I was doing because I wasn't doing trap. I was doing traditional hip-hop, and there was a little unorthodox for the city that I was coming from. If the artists from my city weren't as successful as they were, then it would have been good for me to do what I did. But I think since trap rap was so prevalent, it was like, you gotta do this. And that's just something I wasn't adamant about doing the way that they wanted me to do it. So they kind of fell back on me. I kind of fell back on them. At the end of 2015, Kanye West announced that Pusha T was now president of the label. In the beginning of 2016, we got the Kanye West release Life of Pablo, where he reunited with Kid Cudi, and Good Music was seeing new signees with Designer, who had Panda that was a smash hit at the time, and 070 Shake, who was picked up after Yes Jules showed her music to Pusha T. Later that year, they announced that Tyga was signed to the label, and Migos as well, which it later came out that there was just management negotiations with the Migos that didn't come to fruition, and Tyga wasn't really signed either. John Legend's final release and departure from Good Music would come at the end of 2016 with his project Darkness and Light. Pusha T would sign Francis and the Lights and Chicago rapper Valet as well, with big song Womp Womp, with Sheck West also being signed in that time frame of 2017 to 2018. It felt like 2018 was going to be the year of the Good Music renaissance. They had new signees. Designer had Panda going crazy, with Timmy Turner also performing really well. Valet was on the come-up. Sheck West Mo Bamba was going nuts. And Kanye announced the following releases for May, June of that same year. A Pusha T album, Daytona. The week after, a solo Kanye project, Ye. The week after, a duo Ye and Cudi album, Kids See Ghosts. The week after that, a Nas project titled Nasir, executive produced by Kanye. And the week after that, a Teyana Taylor album, KTSE. Good Music hadn't ever been this active at this rate, and it hadn't been this active in years. Daytona was wildly successful, partially because it coincided with Pusha T's beef and victory over Drake. Kids See Ghosts was beloved by nearly everyone, and I would say a perfect album. Ye was a great project, and Teyana Taylor fans enjoyed hers. Later that same year, Sheck West would release his album Mudboy, but things got quiet again. There was still no official Designer album, no Valet album, and no 070 Shake album. It was over 2 years since Designer and Shake were signed, and eventually it led to Designer just leaving the record label. It's really sticking to my own path. Still, the situation I had to get out that Good Music stuff, I just felt uncomfortable. Then he wound up going to the Christian route, and then the Trump route. I just felt I had to do me, bro. In January of 2020, 070 Shake finally released her first album, Modus Vivendi, which wouldn't even chart on Billboard's top 200 albums of the week. But she was abruptly cut short again from elevating her career when March of 2020 came around and she couldn't even tour for it. This album received glowing reviews from the critics though and was a great project. The other releases that year were Teyana Taylor's The Album, which would be her final one. Teyana Taylor announced she would be leaving and quitting music. I'm going to feel underappreciated if I'm putting in 110% and my label is giving me, 10% of that? She said to Noon. I put in a lot of work and I felt like the label wasn't really hearing me and seeing me. That seemed to be a recurring theme for some of the artists on here. I feel underappreciated. It's not that I retired permanently. It's more like I don't want to move another inch for a company. Tiana Taylor also explained why she was quitting music on an end-of-year Instagram post where she put up her Spotify Wrapped. I'm retiring this chapter of my story with the comfort that I can depart with peace of mind, seeing that all the hard work and passion put in was indeed loved and supported somewhere in the world. I ain't going front, I'm feeling super underappreciated as an artist, receiving little to no real push from the machine, constantly getting the shorter end of the stick, being overlooked. In September of 2020, Kanye did something very interesting though. While in a battle with Universal over his masters, he announced he would be giving 50% of the masters of Good Music signees that he owned back to the artists. I'm giving all Good Music artists back the 50% share I have of their masters. This led to excitement with 070 Shake replying, gang, and Big Sean replying, thank you, this would help so much. Designer also replying favorably as well. Unfortunately, none of them would ever get their masters back. Valet would silently make his exit during this time. We haven't really seen him claim good. And Big Sean was one of the last remaining cornerstones from the Good Music empire to leave after his final album, Detroit 2, which seemed amicable until Ye made some comments saying signing Big Sean was the worst mistake he made on his Drink Champs podcast appearance, that Sean decided to come back saying, at first, I thought it was hilarious. I thought the stuff was funny. Then I took it personal. I took it personal because I'm the only artist who's put out 5 albums under Good Music. Cudi left a long time ago, business-wise. You know what I'm saying? And they still clicked up and linked up, right? So I'm the only artist that put out 5 albums under Good Music. I'm the only one who put out back-to-back-to-back number ones, platinum albums, double platinum albums, platinum album. You know what I'm saying? And by the way, being signed to Kanye is a golden opportunity. It is something. He changed my life, and I love him for that. But every time Kanye has called on me, every single time, no matter what I was doing, within 1 day's notice, I'm wherever he's at, bro. Whether it's to contribute to him in the studio, whether it's to contribute a line, write a verse for him. He just takes maybe parts of the verse, maybe the whole verse, maybe just to help him with his vibe, like just help him catch a vibe. Wherever he's at in the whole world, bro. I've traveled around the world for this man every time he is called. And I've done this and not asked for publishing a lot of the times. Why? Because he gave me a golden opportunity of signing to Good Music. A lot of people sign to Good Music. I just want to keep that in mind. But not a lot of people on Good Music. Nobody on Good Music has put out 5 LPs and back-to-back-to-back number ones, right? So for irony's sake, in 2015 when I won a VMA with Ye and John Legend, for irony's sake, for one man can change the world, I was the first person to tweet Kanye for president. The first one, right? Okay, so when I heard what he was talking about, it didn't make sense, bro. Because, my manager saw my record deal and said, this is a crappy record deal. I would never say that, though. Why? Because it was an opportunity. I could work my way out of anything. Yeah, I'm saying Roc Nation. Yeah, who he hooked me up with. I'm saying Jay Brown said it's the worst deal he'd ever seen. And this man, I had to spend my own money auditing my label because millions of dollars are missing. And you can tell when millions of dollars are missing, right? I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on my label thinking that Universal owes me this money, and the money had been paid to Good Music. The label really just had Pusha T and 070 Shake left. Nobody really got it as bad as 070 Shake, who had appearances on Kanye's Ye album, but was left to release nothing for years. She was the first to speak on the fact that Good Music was officially dead, no mas, in an interview in February of 2022 saying, to be honest, just to keep it real with you, Good Music is not really a thing. Like, nobody works for Good Music. They don't even exist. To be honest, I worked with Def Jam. Nobody works at Good Music, so it's really Def Jam, which has a legacy in itself. Good Music was no longer a thing, just a formality, a technicality. While her 2022 album You Can't Kill Me was released in June under Good and Def Jam, it was really just Def Jam. The same with Pusha T's It's Almost Dry. Good Music had been over. And is it any surprise after Ye was quoted in 2007 saying, running a record label is the biggest mistake I ever made. I never asked to be a label owner. Sony offered it to me, and I took it. But I can't be there when people are calling me to the studio to hear some music or approve clothes for a video. No disrespect to anybody. My focus is graduation. I've got a hard enough time calling radio programmers and getting them to play Can't Tell Me Nothing. a song that's connecting with people, but that's only at 1,400 spins. Back then, he was only focused on his music career. Now he's focused on music, his fashion brand, his school, family, politics, and much, much more we probably don't even know about yet. Raider Klan, a name that was at one point iconic. A young American rap collective also stylized as Raider Klan, removing all of the vowels. First formed back in late 2000s in Carroll City section of southern Florida, the troubled side of Miami Gardens, about 20 miles north of South Beach, that most tourists avoided. This is where founding Raider Klan member, producer, and rapper Space Ghost Perp grew up and gained a reputation for jumping into fights to protect black skateboarders. Space Ghost Perp's music rides from more Afrocentric themes with songs like Black God and Osiris of the East to songs as explicitly raw as Sucka D for 2012. Reminiscent of Compton rapper Eazy-E from W.A., who helped popularize the Los Angeles Raiders football cap that would eventually become synonymous with the style of Raider Klan. Raider Klan became a massive force during the blog era when young emerging artists suddenly had the tools to upload homemade music that they could affordably record in their bedrooms without computers. Distribution no longer depended on getting signed by a massive record company. Artists like Raider Klan could reach an audience with online platforms like MySpace, YouTube, Tumblr, SoundCloud, and Twitter. And during an interview, SGP explained his love of hip-hop from the West Coast, East Coast, and South, which all blended into his production. The way we come off is funk. We all about that 90s stuff. We've been on that vintage West Coast stuff hard. In my eyes, West Coast hip-hop back in the days was untouchable. Now it's in another lane. I'm not from the West Coast, but I got enough balls to say, you know what? If nobody else don't F with that type of stuff, I'm gonna F with it because I love that rap, and I'm gonna bring that stuff back. I want to keep it going. I don't have to talk about gangster stuff or about killing and selling drugs. It can still be funk without talking about that. So that's what we're all trying to do. We came up on Trick Daddy. I'm talking about early Trick Daddy. He had the bald head, thug.com, that type of stuff. That's Miami, that dark, gloomy storytelling stuff. That influenced me growing up, and 3 6 Mafia and all of them did too. But my music basically shows how that raw Miami gutter sound really sounds. People will say it sounds like Memphis, it sounds like Houston, but at the same time, Miami represents that same sound. Our underground music has that same type of sound. We will still listen to DJ Screw and old underground New Orleans music because we was on that same stuff. We all from the South. We never had the chance to expose that to the industry. We had Uncle Luke with the whole bass movement, but you know, I show people what our sound really sounds like, our dark stuff. Space Ghost Perp recruited Dodo to Don, Gaddafi, Money Jr., and Jit, forming the first wave of the Raider Klan collective. Dodo to Don summed up the earlier version of Raider Klan by saying, "Raider Klan is my family, my blood, we linked up from birth. SGP is a well-known artist and great producer of Raider Klan. He's my blood brother, really my first cousin, but we close like brothers. The CEO of Raider Klan Records, which is Gaddafi, is my blood brother, same father, different mother. So we linked. You have what we like to call the BGs, baby gods of the clan. Young Simi, Denzel Curry, and Kenyatta. Very talented but very young artists with so much more room to grow. Then you have what we like to call the OGs, original gods of the clan, which is me, my brother SGP, and my brother Gaddafi. There are many artists of the clan, but I'm not about to name them all. But I can't forget our beautiful first lady of the clan, which is Amber London, a very talented young artist from Texas. The way you get into the clan is by being a strong and humble individual that follows no man or woman. Do you, and stick to yourself, but stay loyal, because we are a family." Not long after the core membership was established, SGP accepted rapper Denzel Curry into Raider Klan after listening to Curry's debut mixtape called King Remembered Underground Tape 1991 to 1995. In terms of their memories of growing up in Carroll City, Denzel Curry recalled that everything seemed like palm trees and sunshine, but this all changed when his cousin was killed. At this point, Curry began to truly notice how bad things were. After the core members were established, Raider Klan eventually grew to include over 40 members from other American cities such as Memphis, Seattle, and Houston. Other artists who helped round out the group included Chris Travis, Eddie Baker, Xavier Wolf, Ruben Slick, Lofty 305, Kenyatta, Amber London, Young Simi, Indigo Child Rick, Nell, and so many more. 4 years after Raider Klan first came together, they made a huge musical statement by releasing 2.7.5 Greatest Hits Volume 1 on September 24, 2012. This was a massive drop because
This was loaded with 44 tracks, acting as a compilation of both Raider Klan members' solo songs as well as collaborative material. Not even a year after releasing the 44-song mega project in March of 2013, they went on to release their second compilation CD titled BRK Greatest Hits Volume 2. 7 short months later, on October 31st, 2013, the Raider Klan finally decided to release their debut album called Tales from the Underground. The group's final release, which was available in 2015, was not an album but a mixtape by the title of the mixtape 2.75. One significant way that Raider Klan has been recognized as a collective is by them being pioneers of the online SoundCloud rap movement, with the main years of Raider Klan's activity taking place anywhere from late 2008 to 2015. This mostly Southern rap crew made their mark right alongside the Southern California-based collective Odd Future, with Tyler the Creator, Frank Ocean, and Earl on the West Coast, and the New York City-situated ASAP Mob that launched ASAP Rocky, Ferg, and Nast on the East Coast. Now, 8 years after splitting up, Raider Klan doesn't get the same recognition as these other regional rap collectives that are all known for merging a particular fashion sense into their identity. Raider Klan was known for wearing black gothic apparel. Odd Future had more of a bright color skateboarder aesthetic, and ASAP Mob was known for its flashy high-end designer clothes and exclusive sneaker flexes, although they did at one point have that dark gothic apparel that was adopted from Raider Klan and the collaborations that Space Ghost Perp had with ASAP Rocky. With members like Denzel Curry, SGP, and Xavier Wolf, formerly Ethel Wolf, going on to make music well beyond the expiration date of Raider Klan, what caused the crew to come to an end and fail to become as well known as Odd Future and ASAP Mob? Ultimately, it would be Space Ghost Perp who would be the creator of the bulk of Raider Klan's sound, much like the RZA provided the core production for Wu-Tang Clan's introductory projects in the 90s. Perp brought about a raw sound that was haunting and wasn't afraid to shock the listener and get under their skin. Speaking of Wu-Tang's the RZA, just as he incorporated rough audio of classic kung fu movies from the 70s and 80s into his beats, SGP was pulling from video games from the 90s such as Killer Instinct and Mortal Kombat. The elements from video game scores helped punctuate Perp's beats with a mix of high energy and lo-fi that found a way to rise up from the crowded streaming archives of SoundCloud, and even mesh with some mainstream listening taste. Raider Klan's mix and match genres into their music, just like their very, very young fans in the 2010s, were doing what breaking up albums into songs into personalized playlists. You could hear elements of horrorcore, drill, hardcore rap, house, and even emo in a lo-fi style filled with choppy audio and distorted bass. Not just online rap fans were listening though. Other Florida rappers seemed to take notice. You could make the argument that a whole wave of emotional Florida rappers that put their feelings front and center in their music were inspired by Raiders, such as Lil Pump and XXX, alongside Ski Mask from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Lyrically, the content of Raider Klan songs tended to be much of the sex, drugs, and money subject matter that other mainstream rappers dove into, but where Raider Klan started to lean to the left in their own direction is when their music brought in witchcraft, demonic imagery, and somewhat Hotep ideologies. After inspiring the ASAP Mob movement, Raider Klan's version grew a strong audience during the 2010s. In fact, in 2011, a relationship between the Raider Klan and ASAP had developed thanks to the chemistry that they had, when Perp produced one of Rocky's early songs, Pretty Flacco, and during a Complex interview, ASAP Rocky even expressed his frustration with SGP. The whole thing with Space Ghost Perp, I didn't say anything. He's putting his foot in his mouth. People are starting to see he's a racist and crazy and bipolar. I look on the internet and every time we put something out, he gets his Raider Klan people to be like, "You're biting." And it's like, you're just mad I'm bigger than you. His life revolves around hating on me. And this is a guy who used to live in my house. My mom took care of him. Before I had a record deal, we were sharing dinner plates. The beef between ASAP and Raider Klan seems to have first sparked off when SGP hopped on Twitter in June of 2012 and accused ASAP 12 of jumping Raider Klan affiliate Matt Stoops. Rocky continued making it known that he and SGP were finished when Rocky was on the red carpet of the 2012 BET Awards. Soulja Boy even jumped in the mix on social media, taking Rocky's side and threatening SGP. But the collision between the ASAP and Raider camps unfortunately went beyond the music and got physical. SGP and his Raider Klan crew popped up at a 2012 ASAP Rocky concert in Miami with over 30 Raider Klan members in the parking lot where the ASAP Mob's tour bus was located. This led to a huge fight, multiple gunshots fired into the air. ASAP Rocky was said not to be involved, but shortly after a fight broke out and photos of Space Ghost Perp in handcuffs appeared, but apparently he was never brought in by police.
And just like that, what started out as the potential for Raider Klan and ASAP Mob to unite came to a total end, with Perp accusing ASAP of jacking their style and Rocky even dissing Space Ghost Perp on the song Angels. They claim the god of black, well your name is purple, I'm the god of that. Gave you back, my nigga pardon that. Raider Klan was a rap family in more ways than just one. A couple of the members were family in real life. Early member Dodo Da Don were first cousins with Space Ghost Perp and blood brothers with Gaddafi. If you had to pick a group member whose style sums up Raider Klan excluding Space Ghost Perp, it would probably be Dodo Da Don. Denzel Curry is arguably the biggest rapper to leave Raider Klan, an artist who isn't afraid to mix dancehall and even punk into his rap style. He started at age 16 with influences from many different rappers, released his first album on his own, Nostalgic 64, not long after before officially leaving Raider Klan. SGP's mixtape Blackland Radio 66.6 was also a strong influence on Denzel Curry, showing him a whole different lane of rap. Curry met SGP over the phone during Perp's New York City ASAP Rocky connection. Denzel Curry explained how things ended between himself and Raider Klan. I was working on Nostalgic 64, threats popped up, and I was still in Raider Klan, and there was a lot of back and forth going on between us and Raider Klan at the time, so I decided to separate myself. And that's when Ethel Wolf and all them boys separated themselves first. That stuff was crazy, but I kept it cool and cordial. Without Space Ghost Perp, you wouldn't have people like Sesh Hollow Water Boys. You wouldn't have people like me. You wouldn't have people like ASAP if it weren't for him. Even though he does do F stuff because he's bipolar, you can't even really blame him at the end of the day. You cannot like the dude, but that stuff came from his age. I understand it. Even with the rap beef, people ask me what happened between me and Perp. Honestly, I just got tired of him trying me because I'm not a hoe at the end of the day, I'm a man. I let it slide for like 3 years. Kenyatta is a more lighthearted Raider Klan member who stood out by coming from Seattle and not one of the southern cities, while also not having the hardcore emo and gunplay lyrics, anime references, or even drug content that was more commonly associated with other members of the crew. Eddie Baker had joined Raider Klan in 2011, helping to popularize music that they often called funk. In 2012, Eddie Baker released his first mixtape Edibles under Raider Klan Records and performed the next year with Raider Klan at Coachella, but he soon started his own group called Healthy Boys alongside rappers Chili Sosa. By 2014, Healthy Boys expanded into its own little clique made up of SHWB, also known as Sesh Hollow Water Boys, consisting of Bones Team Sesh, Xavier Wolf's Hollow Squad, and Chris Travis's Water Boys. Amber London may get confused as being a California-style rapper, but she was from Texas and was described by SGP as the female version of himself. Their first collaboration was low-key, and Amber London described herself by saying, "I feel like Texas is a big part of how I became a rapper, and, it comes out in my music, I feel. It makes my sound different, and it's just another puzzle piece to the different Raider Klan members that we have. I can do any sound that I want, but the Texas sound is the one I want to exert more, so people can understand and get exposed to how it really is. And not just the lean and syrup part, but there's other aspects to it too." History didn't play out in Raider Klan's favor as it did for other crews of the blog era. With all of them eventually falling apart, Raider Klan lacked the real commercial crossover power that Odd Future and ASAP Mob were able to enjoy. Or maybe they just weren't even able to keep things together for enough time for it to break into the mainstream. Odd Future were able to connect to skateboarders and ASAP was able to influence the hypebeast crowd. Raider Klan's branding was a mixed bag, and they didn't really have the solid professional infrastructure or guidance that other crews were able to make use of, or even a massive deal or a leader that was willing to listen to someone that knew what they were doing. Also, the Raider Klan was way too big to provide any real leadership and order to. Raider Klan made it known that as a collective they were anti-mainstream, and even members such as Bones, Team Sesh, and others, after leaving Raider Klan, would refuse to do anything commercial for years on end, even avoiding putting their music on platforms like Spotify or Apple or charging for it. Space Ghost Perp didn't make it any easier for his crew to grow with his steady string of industry beefs with anyone from ASAP Mob, Soulja Boy, Wiz Khalifa, internal beefs, and just countless others. Just imagine what could have happened. Earl Sweatshirt was a huge fan. Odd Future was known to occasionally play Raider Klan songs at shows before they hit the stage. Beats for Raider Klan's Ethel Wolf and Chris Travis were made by Eric Dingus, the producer of official Drake remixes. ASAP Mob even incorporated Perp's focus on Egyptian hieroglyphics and used Raider Klan's upside down A as V for their clothing line V-Lone.
With SoundCloud rappers like Lil Peep, who died in 2017, and XXX, who died in 2018, having been big fans of Raider Klan's music, there's no telling how much longer the Raider Klan movement could have lasted had they survived long enough to build a bigger bond and tour together with all of their members. Even though XXX had F Perp tattooed on him, he was a known supporter and fan originally before he took off. One of the saddest parts of the death of the Raider Klan is what could have been, and that when they broke up, a lot of their legacy seemingly faded from the internet, unlike other groups like Odd Future and ASAP Mob, which are still talked about and remembered for even having existed, let alone falling off or separating. Their music was heavily distributed on blogs that are pretty much now deleted, outdated platforms like Tumblr, and on legacy media archives that have somewhat vanished, whilst a lot of the music from these other groups is available on Spotify and other streaming platforms where people look at music now. So with such a lack of physical recordings and well-preserved audio files, the music of Raider Klan has kind of turned into a scavenger hunt for lost media.